The notification on my iPad blinked once silent and deadly in the darkness of my study. Motion detected in the kitchen. I froze my hand hovering over the screen. I had forgotten to tell my son Trayvon that the technician had come by this morning while he was out. I had forgotten to tell him that the security system he thought was broken was now recording in 4K resolution. Curiosity turned to cold dread as I tapped the notification. What I saw on that screen did not just break my heart, it shattered my entire reality. 15 minutes later, I was lying on the floor bleeding while my own family staged my accident. Before I tell you how I ended up fighting for my life in my own home, please hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever trusted the wrong person. My name is Jefferson Moore. I am 70 years old, and for the last 40 years, I have kept a secret. To my neighbors here in Atlanta, I am just a retired Navy veteran living on a fixed income. I drive a 2015 Ford truck, I wear clothes from Goodwill, and I clip coupons. My son Trayvon and his wife Skylar think I am just a senile old man clinging to his pension checks. They do not know about the patents I hold for radar guidance systems. They do not know about the blind trust that manages $20 million of my assets. And up until 5 minutes ago, I thought that was my biggest secret. I was wrong. I sat in my leather armchair, the only piece of furniture Skylar had not yet thrown out, and watched the live feed from the kitchen. It was 9 p.m. The house was quiet, or so I thought. On the screen, the kitchen lights were dim. Skylar was standing at the island. My daughter-in-law is a beautiful woman on the outside, with her blonde hair always perfectly styled and her expensive manicures. But tonight her face was twisted into a sneer I had never seen before. She was wearing silk pajamas that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Beside her was a glass of orange juice. My nightly routine. Trayvon always brought it to me, saying it was good for my blood pressure. I zoomed in on the screen. Skylar was holding a small plastic bag. She took out 3 blue pills. I recognized them immediately. They were beta blockers. Strong ones. I do not take beta blockers. My heart rate is naturally low. If I took those, my heart would slow down until it simply stopped. I watched in horror as she placed the pills on the granite counter and crushed them with the back of a heavy spoon. The sound was inaudible through the muted device, but I could feel the vibration in my bones. She swept the blue powder into my orange juice and stirred it vigorously. Trayvon walked into the frame. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the man I paid tuition for even when he failed out of business school twice. He looked tired. He leaned against the fridge, watching his wife poison his father. "Are you sure about the dosage, Skylar?" he asked. His voice was low, but the new microphones picked it up clearly. I turned up the volume, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped the iPad. Skylar laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "Stop being such a coward, Trev. I checked online. 3 of these mixed with his normal medication will drop his heart rate to nothing. It will look like a natural cardiac arrest. He is 70 years old. Nobody investigates when an old man dies in his sleep." She handed him the glass. "Stir it again before you give it to him. We need this done tonight. The bank called again today. They are going to foreclose on the condo next week if we do not come up with $50,000. Trayvon took the glass. He looked at the swirling liquid. I waited for him to throw it in the sink. I waited for him to yell at her. I waited for my son to be the man I raised. Instead, he sighed. "But what about the autopsy, Skylar? Dad is a veteran. The VA might look into it." Skylar rolled her eyes. "You are so pathetic. There won't be an autopsy if the family doctor signs off on natural causes. And Dr. Sterling is practically senile himself. Besides, once he is gone, this house is ours. This land alone is worth $1.5 million. We sell it, we pay the debts, and we are free of this gloomy old dungeon." She looked around my kitchen with disgust. "I hate this place. It smells like old people and cheap soap." I felt a physical blow to my chest. It wasn't the heart attack they were planning, it was the betrayal. They weren't just waiting for me to die, they were actively accelerating the process. My son was going to feed me poison to pay off his wife's shopping debts. I watched Trayvon nod slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I will take it up to him. Just make sure you delete the search history on the laptop." Skylar kissed him on the cheek, a kiss of death. "Go be a good son, Trev. Say goodnight to Daddy." I switched off the iPad. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I had to think. I spent 30 years in the Navy as an electronics engineer. I have been in war zones. I have survived typhoons in the Pacific. I know how to survive. But this was different. This was the enemy inside the perimeter. I looked at the door of my study. It was closed but not locked. I had maybe 2 minutes before Trevon climbed the stairs. I couldn't drink that juice. But if I refused it, they would know something was wrong. Skylar was desperate. If the poison didn't work, she might try something more direct. I needed to get out. I needed to get to the police. I stood up, but my knees buckled. The stress was hitting me hard. I grabbed my cane. I needed a weapon. I looked around the room. Books, a lamp, a heavy brass paperweight shaped like an anchor. I grabbed the anchor and shoved it into the pocket of my cardigan. It weighed down the fabric, pulling it saggy, but I didn't care. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy, slow. The footsteps of a man walking to his own execution or his father's. I moved to the window. It was a second-story drop. At 40, I would have made the jump. At 70, with arthritis in my hips, it was suicide. The only way out was through the door. I had to get past Trevon. Knock, knock. Dad. It is Trevon. I brought your juice. His voice was so normal, so casual. It made me sick. I didn't answer. I backed away into the shadows of the room, clutching the iPad to my chest. I needed that evidence. It was the only thing that would prove I wasn't just a crazy old man making up stories. Dad. Are you awake? The doorknob turned. I had locked it from the inside just seconds before, a habit from my service days that I had never broken. Dad, why is the door locked? I heard the panic rising in his voice. He knew I never locked the door. Skylar, he called out. Skylar, get up here. He locked the door. I heard the rapid clicking of heels on the hardwood stairs. Skylar's voice was sharp. What do you mean he locked it? Did he hear us? I don't know, Trevon stammered. He's not answering. Break it down, Skylar ordered. Her voice had lost all its sweetness. Break it down. Trevon, if he calls someone, we are finished. The wood of the door frame cracked as Trevon threw his shoulder against it. It was an old house built solid in the 1920s, but Trevon was a big man, a former football player who had let himself go but still had mass. I looked for an escape route. The bathroom connected to the study. I rushed towards it, but I was too slow. With a splintering crash, the study door flew open. Trevon stood there, panting, the glass of orange juice still miraculously balanced in his hand. The orange liquid sloshed over the rim, dripping onto the floor. Skylar was right behind him, her face a mask of fury. Dad, Trevon said, his eyes scanning the room. What are you doing? Why did you lock the door? I stood my ground, leaning on my cane with one hand clutching the iPad with the other. I know what is in the glass, Trevon. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Trevon went pale. His hand shook and the glass slipped. It hit the floor and shattered. Orange juice and blue powder splattered across his expensive sneakers. What are you talking about, Dad? He whispered. It is just juice. Don't lie to me, boy. I roared, my voice finding the command tone I hadn't used since I commanded a deck crew. I saw you. I saw her crushing the pills. The camera is working, Trevon. I fixed it. Skylar stepped forward. She didn't look scared. She looked dangerous. Give me the iPad, Jeff. I took a step back. Get out of my house. Both of you. I am calling the police. I tried to tap the screen to dial 911, but my fingers were clumsy with adrenaline. Skylar lunged at me. She was faster than I expected. She grabbed the iPad and tried to wrench it from my grip. No, you don't, you old bat, she hissed. I held on, but then Trevon was there. He wasn't attacking me, he was trying to separate us, but in his panic he grabbed my arms, pinning them to my sides. Stop it, Dad! Just stop it! He yelled. Let me go, Trevon, I shouted, struggling against his grip. She is trying to kill me. We are just doing what needs to be done, Skylar screamed. She ripped the iPad from my hands. She looked at the screen, saw the paused video of herself in the kitchen, and her eyes went wide with rage. She raised the device and smashed it against the corner of my heavy oak desk. The screen shattered. There she panted, throwing the broken pieces on the floor. No evidence, no police. I looked at Trevon. Let me go, son. Please. Trevon looked at me, tears streaming down his face. I can't, Dad. We are in too deep. If we let you go, you will send us to jail. I realized then that my son was gone. The boy I loved was dead, replaced by this desperate coward. I still had the brass anchor in my pocket. I tried to reach for it, but Skylar saw the movement. She looked around for a weapon. Her eyes landed on the heavy ceramic vase on the mantelpiece. My wife Etta had bought that vase in Morocco 30 years ago. Skylar grabbed it by the neck. "Hold him still," Trayvon, she ordered. "No, Skylar, we can't," Trayvon pleaded, but he didn't let go. He held me tighter. "It is him or us," Skylar shouted. "Do you want to go to prison for attempted murder? Because that is what he will tell them. Hold him." I tried to kick, I tried to bite, but I am 70 years old. My strength failed me. I looked up at Skylar as she raised the vase. I saw no hesitation in her blue eyes, only cold calculation. "I am sorry, Jeff," she said. "You really should have just drunk the juice." The vase came down. I tried to dodge, but Trayvon held me fast. The ceramic impacted the side of my head with a sickening crunch. Pain exploded behind my eyes. White light blinded me. My legs gave out. I felt Trayvon release me and I crumpled to the floor. The world started to spin and fade. I could taste copper in my mouth. Blood was running into my eye. I lay on the Persian rug, unable to move, unable to speak. I was drifting in and out of consciousness. I heard Trayvon sobbing. "Oh God, Skylar, you killed him. You actually killed him. Shut up. He is still breathing." Skylar snapped. Her voice sounded far away, like she was speaking from underwater. "What do we do?" Trayvon asked, his voice rising in hysteria. "We stick to the plan," Skylar said, calm and terrifying. "But we improvise." He didn't drink the juice. So he fell. He fell. Trayvon repeated. "Yes," Skylar said. "I heard her walking around the room. She was staging the scene. She kicked the table over. She threw some books on the floor. He had a dizzy spell," she rehearsed, her voice sharp. "Dementia. He got confused. He thought there were intruders. He attacked us. You tried to restrain him, and he fell and hit his head on the desk. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them I was still here. I could still hear them. But my body wouldn't obey. Darkness was closing in from the edges of my vision. "Go get the juice from the kitchen," Skylar ordered. "Pour it down the sink. Wash the glass. Make sure there is no trace of the pills. I will call 911. I heard Trayvon running out of the room. Then I heard Skylar's voice change. It became high-pitched, frantic, terrified. A perfect performance. 911, please help. It is my father-in-law. He has gone crazy. He attacked my husband. There is blood everywhere. Please hurry. I think he is dying." She hung up the phone and walked over to where I lay. I felt the toe of her expensive shoe nudge my ribs. "Just die already, old man," she whispered. "Do us all a favor." That was the last thing I heard before the darkness took me completely. I didn't know if I would wake up. But I knew one thing: if I did wake up, Jefferson Moore, the quiet retiree, was dead. The man who woke up would be the soldier I used to be, and I would bring down hell on the people who did this to me. The first thing I felt was not pain, but the cold bite of steel against my right wrist. I tried to lift my hand to touch my throbbing temple, but my arm was jerked back by a resistance I did not expect. I blinked my eyes open. The harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital room stabbed into my retinas, forcing me to squint. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. A rhythmic beeping sound echoed in the small, sterile room, matching the pounding of my heart. As my vision cleared, I looked down at my wrist. A silver handcuff chained me to the metal rail of the hospital bed. I was a prisoner. Confusion washed over me like a tidal wave, followed immediately by a surge of adrenaline that cut through the fog of whatever drugs they had pumped into my system. I tried to sit up, but the room spun violently. A wave of nausea hit me, and I gagged dryly. "Easy there, Mr. Moore," a deep voice said from the corner of the room. I turned my head. A uniformed police officer was sitting in a chair reading a magazine. He looked young, too young to understand the gravity of the situation. He stood up and walked over to the bed, his hand resting casually near his belt. "Where am I?" I croaked. My throat felt like I had swallowed broken glass. "Why am I in cuffs?" "You are at Atlanta Memorial," the officer said, his face impassive. "You had an episode, sir. You hurt yourself, and you attacked your family. We have to keep you restrained for everyone's safety until the doctor clears you." An episode. Attacked my family. The words floated in the air, heavy and poisonous. Memories of the last hour flooded back. The blue pills being crushed, the orange juice, the confrontation in my study. Skylar raising the vase. "I did not attack anyone," I rasped, pulling against the cuff. "They tried to kill me. My daughter-in-law, she poisoned my drink. She hit me with a vase. You have to arrest her." The officer sighed the way one sighs at an unruly child. He did not write anything down. He did not look concerned. He looked tired. "Just relax. Sir, the doctor will be in shortly." I lay back against the pillow, my chest heaving. Panic began to set in. This was the second phase of their plan. If the poison didn't work, they would paint me as a danger to myself and others. They were going to lock me away. The door opened, and a man in a white coat walked in, followed by a nurse. He wasn't Dr. Sterling, my usual physician. This man was younger, with wire-rimmed glasses and a look of professional detachment. "Ah, Mr. Moore, you are awake," he said, checking the monitor above my head. "I am Dr. Evans. You took quite a nasty fall. You have a severe concussion and required 12 stitches. "I didn't fall," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the pounding in my head. "I was assaulted. My daughter-in-law struck me with a ceramic object." Dr. Evans nodded slowly, but he wasn't listening. He was observing. He shone a penlight into my eyes. "Paranoid delusions are common with this level of cognitive decline," he murmured to the nurse who made a note on her tablet. "I am not delusional," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Check my blood. Check for beta blockers." She put heart medication in my juice. "We ran a full tox screen, Mr. Moore," the doctor said calmly. "There were no beta blockers in your system, just the sedatives we administered when you arrived." My blood ran cold. Of course, I never drank the juice. Trayvon had spilled it. There was no poison in my body to find. They had won that round without even trying. Before I could argue further, the door opened again. My stomach turned as Skylar and Trayvon walked in. They were putting on the performance of a lifetime. Skylar had a bandage wrapped around her forearm and a small bruise deliberately applied with makeup I suspected on her cheek. Her eyes were red and puffy. She clung to Trayvon's arm as if she were terrified. Trayvon looked devastated. He was hunched over his shoulders, shaking. He couldn't look me in the eye. "Oh, Dad," Trayvon choked out. "Thank God you are alive." "Get them out of here," I growled. "Get them out." "Oh, God, he is still doing it." Skylar sobbed, burying her face in Trayvon's shoulder. He looked so angry. "I am scared, Trayvon. He tried to kill me. I did not touch you," I yelled, struggling against the restraints. The metal dug into my skin, drawing blood. "You tried to poison me. You smashed my iPad." Dr. Evans stepped between the bed and my family. "Please calm down, Mr. Moore, or I will have to sedate you again." He turned to Trayvon and Skylar, speaking in a low, sympathetic tone. "I am sorry you have to see him like this. The dementia is advancing more aggressively than we thought. The violent outbursts, the paranoia about being poisoned, these are all classic symptoms. Dementia." I repeated the word tasting like ash. "I do not have dementia. I am a retired engineer. I hold patents. Ask me anything. Ask me about radar frequency modulation." "It is okay, Dad," Trayvon said, stepping forward. His voice was thick with fake tears. "We know it is not your fault. We know you didn't mean to hurt Skylar. You just got confused. You thought there were intruders, right? He was feeding the narrative. He was cementing the lie." Skylar peeked out from behind him. "We just want you to get better, Jeff. We love you so much. It broke my heart when you came at me with that cane. I thought you were going to kill me." "You are a liar," I spat. "You are a snake, Mr. Moore." "That is enough," the doctor said sharply. He signaled the nurse, who moved toward the IV bag. "Look at him," Skylar cried, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He is totally gone. He hates us. We have taken care of him for years, and this is how he repays us." "Doctor, we cannot take him home like this. I do not feel safe. What if he attacks the baby? There was no baby." But the doctor didn't know that. He looked at Skylar with deep sympathy. "I understand, Mrs. Moore. Given the severity of this episode and the assault on a family member, I cannot recommend releasing him into your care. He needs a secure facility. A secure facility. A nursing home. Or worse, a psychiatric ward." This was the end game. They were going to bury me alive in a white room where no one would listen to the crazy old man. I looked at the police officer. He was nodding in agreement. I looked at the doctor. He was signing a chart. I looked at Trayvon. He was staring at the floor, shame radiating off him, but not enough to make him speak the truth. And then I looked at Skylar. For a brief second, our eyes met. Behind the tears and the fear, there was a glint of pure triumph. She smiled. It was a tiny microscopic movement of her lips, but I saw it. She had won. She had beaten me. I opened my mouth to scream to rage to tell them about the hidden camera in the study. But then I stopped. The iPad was gone. Skylar had smashed it. But the camera itself, the physical device hidden in the bookshelf, was still there. And the footage wasn't just on the iPad. I had designed the system myself. It backed up to a secure cloud server, a server only I had the password to. If I screamed about cameras now, Skylar would go home and tear the house apart until she found them. She would destroy the hard drives. She would burn the house down if she had to. If I kept fighting, they would sedate me. I would wake up in a padded room drooling and helpless. They would get power of attorney. They would drain my accounts before I could blink. I remembered my training. SEER school. Survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. When you are captured, when the enemy has total control, you do not fight. You do not waste energy. You wait. You observe. You survive. Silence is gold. I looked at the nurse approaching with the syringe. I looked at the handcuffs. I let my body go limp. I allowed my jaw to slacken. I let my eyes lose their focus, drifting to a spot on the ceiling. I forced my breathing to slow down, to become shallow and rhythmic. "Mr. Moore," the doctor asked, noticing the change. I didn't answer. I let a little bit of drool escape the corner of my mouth. I became exactly what they wanted me to be. A broken, confused old man. "Dad," Trayvon asked, stepping closer. I looked through him as if he wasn't there. I mumbled something incoherent, a string of nonsense words. "See?" Skylar whispered. "He is gone again." The doctor held up a hand, stopping the nurse. "Wait. He seems to be calming down. The aggressive phase might be passing." He shined the light in my eyes again. I didn't blink. I stared past him into the void. "Catatonic state, perhaps," the doctor muttered. "This confirms the diagnosis." "Rapid decline." He turned to my son. "Mr. Moore, I am going to recommend a 72-hour psychiatric hold for observation. After that, we can discuss long-term placement. But he is not going home tonight." "No," Skylar said quickly, too quickly. "No, doctor, please. If he is calm, if he is just confused, we want to take him home." The doctor frowned. "I strongly advise against that. He is dangerous." "He is my father," Trayvon said, reciting the lines Skylar must have fed him. "We can't leave him here alone. He will be scared. We have a guest suite downstairs. It is secure. We can make sure he doesn't wander." Skylar jumped in. "We can hire a private nurse doctor. We have the means. Please, let us take him home. We want his last days to be with family." I knew why they wanted me home. They needed me to sign papers. They needed to find where I hid the rest of my money. They couldn't do that if I was locked in a state facility. They needed me in their private prison. The doctor hesitated. "It is against medical advice. But if you insist, and if the police officer clears it..." The officer shrugged. "If the family doesn't want to press charges for the assault, I can't hold him. It is a domestic matter." "Thank you, Officer," Skylar said, flashing him a brave, tragic smile. "We just want to take care of him." I lay there motionless while they signed my life away. I listened as they discussed my transport. I felt the nurse wipe the blood from my face. Inside, my mind was razor sharp. My heart was cold ice. "You want to take me home, Skylar," I thought. "You want to bring the Trojan horse inside your walls. Fine. Take me home. Take me back to the cameras. Take me back to my tools. You think you are taking home a helpless old vegetable. You are wrong. You are taking home a soldier who has just gone behind enemy lines." I closed my eyes and let out a long, shuddering breath, feigning sleep. The war had just begun. The ride home was silent and suffocating. Trayvon drove with his eyes fixed on the road, refusing to look at me in the rearview mirror, while Skylar sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone as if she were simply returning from a grocery run rather than transporting a prisoner. I sat in the back seat, my head throbbing against the window, watching the familiar streets of Atlanta roll by. Every tree, every street lamp was a reminder of the life I had built here, the life that was being systematically dismantled. When the car pulled into the driveway, my heart stopped. A massive metal dumpster sat in the middle of the front lawn. It was filled to the brim with black garbage bags and broken furniture. Trayvon parked the car and came around to open my door. He grabbed my arm, not with the gentleness of a son helping his father, but with the firm grip of a jailer. "Come on, Dad, let us get you inside," he muttered. I stumbled out my legs, still weak from the sedatives. As we walked past the dumpster, I saw a flash of blue fabric sticking out of the debris. I froze. It was the quilt Etta had sewn for our 25th anniversary, the one with the star pattern she had stitched by hand over 3 winters. Beside it lay her collection of porcelain angels shattered into jagged white shards. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage that cut through the drug haze. "Why is Etta's quilt in the trash?" Skylar stepped out of the car, slamming the door. "We are decluttering, Jeff. That old junk smells like mothballs and dust. We need to modernize if we are going to sell." "Sell," I repeated. "You cannot sell my house." "It is not your house anymore, old man," she hissed, walking past me up the steps. "As far as the world is concerned, you are mentally incompetent. We are just managing your assets. Now get inside before the neighbors see you drooling." Trayvon dragged me toward the front door. I tried to resist, to pull away toward the dumpster to save the quilt, but he was too strong. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. The warm, beige walls Etta loved had been painted a sterile, cold gray. My mahogany bookshelves were gone, replaced by cheap modern art. The photos of Trayvon's graduation and our family vacations had vanished, leaving lighter squares on the fresh paint like ghosts. They didn't take me to my bedroom. They didn't take me to the guest room. Trayvon guided me toward the kitchen pantry door, the door that led to the basement. "Not down there, Trayvon," I pleaded, looking him in the eye. "It is damp. It is cold. Please, son." Trayvon looked away, his face pained but his grip unyielding. "It is for your own safety, Dad. You might wander off. The stairs are dangerous upstairs. Down here you can't hurt yourself." He opened the door and the smell hit me. Mildew, stale air, the scent of a grave. He nudged me forward and I had no choice but to descend into the darkness, leaving the last remnants of my dignity at the top of the stairs. The basement was a finished space technically, but it had not been used in a decade. It was where I stored my old tools and the holiday decorations. Now it was my cell. Trayvon had dragged a stained twin mattress onto the concrete floor in the corner. There were no sheets, no pillow, just a scratchy wool blanket that smelled of oil and gasoline. "Sit down," Skylar ordered, coming down the stairs behind us. I sat on the edge of the mattress. My joints ached from the cold seeping up through the thin foam. Skylar stood over me, her arms crossed, a look of utter disgust on her face. "Give me your watch," she demanded. It was a Rolex, a retirement gift from the Navy. I shielded it with my hand. "No, it is mine." "Trayvon, take it off him," she snapped. My son stepped forward. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered, as he pried my fingers apart. He unclasped the watch and handed it to her. Then he patted my pockets. He took my wallet, my keys, and the handkerchief Etta had embroidered for me. "Phone too," Skylar said. I didn't have my phone. I had left it in the hospital room, hidden under the mattress, hoping a nurse would find it later. "I don't have it," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "Fine. We will find it later. If you are hiding it, you will regret it." She reached into a plastic bag she had brought down and tossed something at me. It landed on the mattress with a thud. It was a sandwich wrapped in plastic and a bottle of warm water. "That is dinner," she said. "Don't expect room service. You eat what we give you. And here." She kicked a plastic bucket toward me. "For the bathroom. We are not having you wander around the house at night." I looked at the bucket, then at my son. "Trayvon," I said, my voice low and steady. "You are a grown man. You are letting her treat your father like a dog. Is this how I raised you?" Trayvon flinched, but Skylar stepped between us, blocking my view of him. "You didn't raise him," she spat. "You bought him. You adopted a stray and tried to make him into a soldier, but he is not you. He is smart enough to know where his bread is buttered." She grabbed Trayvon's arm. "Let us go, babe. Lock the door." Trayvon looked back at me one last time. His eyes were wet. "Just sleep, Dad. It will be easier if you just sleep." They walked up the stairs. The heavy wooden door slammed shut. I heard the click of the deadbolt. Then I heard the sound of a heavy object, probably a chair, being wedged under the handle from the outside. I was alone. I sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator overhead and the muffled footsteps of my captors. I was 70 years old. I was a decorated veteran. I had designed guidance systems for missiles that could hit a target from 500 miles away. And now I was sitting on a dirty mattress with a bucket for a toilet waiting to die in my own basement. I ate the sandwich. It was bologna and cheese, stale and dry. I drank the water. I needed the energy. Despair was a luxury I could not afford. Skylar thought she had stripped me of everything. She had taken my freedom, my dignity, and my contact with the outside world. But she had made a fatal error. She had put me in the basement. This basement wasn't just storage. 30 years ago when I bought this house, I had reinforced the foundation. I had run my own wiring. And I had installed a secondary breaker box behind a false panel in the utility closet just 10 feet away from where I sat. Trevon knew about the main breaker. He didn't know about the backup grid I had installed for my ham radio equipment back in the 90s. He thought all that old junk was broken. I waited until the house went quiet. It must have been past midnight. I moved slowly, my body screaming in protest. I crawled off the mattress and felt my way along the wall until my fingers brushed the cold metal of the utility closet handle. It was locked, of course, but it was a simple privacy lock. I used the metal tab from the zipper of my trousers to twist the mechanism. It clicked open. Inside it was pitch black, but I knew this space by heart. My fingers traced the wall until I found the loose panel. I pried it open. Behind it was a small keypad I had installed 5 years ago when I upgraded the house to a smart system. Skylar thought the smart home features were just the thermostat and the doorbell camera. She didn't know I had wired the entire house with pinhole cameras and microphones hidden in the smoke detectors and the crown molding. I had deactivated them when Trevon moved in to give them privacy, but the system had a failsafe, a voice activation protocol I had coded myself. It didn't need an internet connection to wake up, it just needed power and a command. I found the emergency power switch for the backup battery array. I flipped it. A tiny red LED blinked to life on the keypad. The battery was old, but it held a charge. I leaned close to the hidden microphone embedded in the panel. I had to be quiet. If they heard me speaking, they would come down. System, I whispered, my voice raspy. Authorization, Sierra Tango Alpha 19er. Silence. The red light blinked steadily. Voice print recognized a robotic female voice whispered back from a tiny speaker. Welcome, Commander Moore. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Activate Protocol Ghost, I commanded. Protocol Ghost initiated, the voice confirmed. Audio and video recording enabled. Cloud upload pending internet connection. I didn't have internet access down here. Skylar had changed the Wi-Fi password, I was sure of it. But the system had a localized buffer. It would record to the hard drive hidden in this wall until it could connect. Show me the master feed, I whispered. A small 4-inch LCD screen embedded in the panel flickered to life. It was grainy and the color balance was off, but it worked. I saw the living room. Empty. I saw the kitchen. Empty. I cycled through the cameras. Then I saw them. The feed from the master bedroom. My bedroom. Skylar and Trevon were there. They were lying in my bed where I had held Etta while she took her last breath. Skylar was wearing a silk robe, drinking wine from one of my crystal glasses. Trevon was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Stop moping, Trev. Skylar was saying, her voice tinny through the small speaker. We did it. He is contained. Tomorrow we get the lawyer to draft the power of attorney. Once we sell this place, we can pay off the sharks and move to Miami. Trevon looked up. His face was pale. What if he dies down there, Skylar? It is cold. He has a head injury. Then our problems are solved even faster. Skylar laughed. Don't be such a baby. He is a tough old bird. He will survive long enough to sign the papers. After that, who cares? I watched them, my hands clenched into fists. They were celebrating my demise in my own sanctuary. I cycled to the next camera, the hallway. I saw something that made me pause. Skylar had left her purse on the console table near the front door, and right next to it was a wireless router extender. I stared at the screen. The router had a WPS button. If I could trigger a reboot of the main modem from down here, the extender might reset to default factory settings for a brief window. I looked at the utility panel. The main coaxial cable for the house internet ran right through this closet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small multi-tool I had managed to palm from the workbench before they shoved me onto the mattress. Skylar hadn't checked my back pocket. I found the coaxial cable. I unscrewed it, severing the connection to the upstairs modem. Upstairs on the screen, I saw Skylar frown. She tapped her phone. The Wi-Fi is down, she complained. Trev, go check the router. Trayvon stood up and walked out of the bedroom. I waited 10 seconds, then I screwed the cable back in. The connection re-established, but during that reboot cycle, the system was vulnerable. "Connect to network," I whispered to the panel. "Override code Blue Anchor." The system pinged. "Connection established. Cloud upload in progress." I slumped against the wall, tears of relief stinging my eyes. The cameras were recording, and they were sending every second of video and audio to a secure server halfway across the world. I watched the screen again. Trayvon was back in the bedroom. "It is back on," he said. "Probably just a glitch." "A glitch," Skylar muttered. "Everything in this house is old and broken, just like your father." I smiled in the darkness. "You are wrong, Skylar," I thought. "This house is a fortress, and you just locked yourself in with the commander." I closed the panel, leaving just a crack so I could see the screen. I crawled back to the mattress and lay down, pulling the scratchy blanket up to my chin. Let them sleep. Let them think they had won. Tomorrow I would begin the counterattack. I had eyes everywhere now. I would watch. I would listen. And I would wait for them to make a mistake, because they were greedy. And greedy people always make mistakes. The morning sun did not reach my cell in the basement, but I knew it was day by the heavy footsteps thumping above my head. I had spent the night staring at the grainy feed on my hidden monitor, watching my enemies sleep in my bed. But now the house was awake and vibrating with a nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. I huddled on the stained mattress, my stomach growling a hollow protest against the single sandwich I had eaten 20 hours ago. I crawled over to the utility panel and cracked it open just an inch. The screen flickered to life. The camera in the living room showed Skylar pacing back and forth. She was wearing a white pantsuit that looked professional and expensive, the kind of outfit a real estate agent would wear. Trayvon was vacuuming the rug with a frantic desperation sweating through his dress shirt. They were staging the house. My suspicions were confirmed when the doorbell rang. On the screen, I saw Trayvon rush to answer it. A tall man in a navy suit stepped in, carrying a leather portfolio. He looked like a shark smelling blood. "Mr. Calloway." "Welcome," Trayvon said, shaking the man's hand too vigorously. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Mr. Calloway looked around the living room, his eyes calculating the square footage and the crown molding. "It is a beautiful property, Mr. Moore. The location is prime Buckhead real estate. But you said on the phone you needed a cash buyer and a 10-day closing. That usually implies distress." "We are just motivated sellers," Skylar interjected, stepping forward with her most charming smile. "My husband has a job opportunity in Europe. We need to liquidate quickly." I clenched my fists in the darkness. Europe. They were going to take my money and run across the ocean. Mr. Calloway nodded slowly. "Well, the market is hot. A house like this usually lists for $1.5 million. But for a cash offer in 10 days, you are looking at maybe $900,000. Investors want a discount for speed. $900,000. They were willing to throw away $600,000 of my hard work just to get their hands on quick cash. It was robbery, plain and simple. "We will take it," Trayvon said quickly. "Just get us the offer today." "Excellent," Mr. Calloway said. "Let me just do a quick walkthrough to verify the condition. I need to see the foundation and the mechanicals." "Of course," Skylar said. "The main floor is here. Bedrooms upstairs." "And the basement?" Mr. Calloway asked. "I need to check the furnace and the water heater." I froze. "They were coming down here." Trayvon hesitated. "The basement is a bit cluttered. We use it for storage." "That is fine," Mr. Calloway said, moving toward the pantry door. "I just need a quick look." I looked around my prison. There was nowhere to hide. If the realtor saw me, a bruised old man sleeping on a dirty mattress in a locked basement, he might ask questions. Or worse, Trayvon might tell him I was the confused, senile grandfather who insisted on sleeping down here. They would spin the narrative before I could open my mouth. I had to act. I had to make sure this house was unsellable. I had to become the nightmare they claimed I was. I looked at the utility sink in the corner. Underneath it was a bucket of old grease I had used for my car years ago, mixed with dust and dead insects. It was foul. It was perfect. I scooped a handful of the black sludge. It smelled of decay and oil. I smeared it over my face, matting it into my gray hair. I rubbed it onto my shirt, tearing the fabric at the collar. I kicked over the waste bucket, letting the smell of urine fill the small space. I stood in the center of the room, trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the mission. I was no longer Jefferson Moore, retired engineer. I was the ghost in the machine. I was the monster in the basement. I heard the key turn in the lock. The chair wedged against the handle was pulled away. Light flooded the stairwell. "Just watch your step," Trayvon said, his voice tight with anxiety. "The bulb is blown down there." I waited until I saw the polished tips of Mr. Calloway's shoes on the bottom step. Then I screamed. It was not a scream of pain. It was a guttural, animalistic roar that tore from my throat and bounced off the concrete walls. "Get out!" I bellowed, lunging into the shaft of light. Mr. Calloway jumped back, nearly knocking Trayvon over. I charged at them, my eyes wide and wild, my face a mask of black grease and madness. "They are in the walls!" I shrieked, grabbing the railing and shaking it until the wood groaned. "The bodies are in the walls! You cannot wash out the blood! Jesus Christ!" Mr. Calloway yelled, retreating up the stairs. "Dad, stop it!" Trayvon shouted, trying to block the realtor's view. I did not stop. I threw myself against the stairs, clawing at the air. "She poisoned the water." I screamed, pointing a grimy finger at Skylar, who stood at the top of the stairs, her face pale with horror. "The devil is in the kitchen. Do not drink the water. The house is cursed." I grabbed a handful of the dirty insulation I had ripped from the ceiling earlier and threw it at them like confetti. "Death is here," I chanted, rocking back and forth. "Death is here!" Mr. Calloway scrambled backward, his composure shattered. "You did not mention there was a situation in the basement." "He is sick," Skylar cried, her voice shrill. "He is having an episode. Please ignore him." "Ignore him!" Mr. Calloway gasped, straightening his tie. "He is talking about bodies in the walls. He looks... My God, the smell." I took a deep breath and let out a long, low moan that sounded like a dying animal. "Run!" I whispered loud enough to Carrie. "Run before she gets you too." Mr. Calloway looked from me to Skylar, then to Trayvon. He saw the fear in their eyes. He saw the lock on the outside of the door. He saw the madness. "I cannot list this property," he said, backing away toward the front door. "I cannot sell a house with this liability. Good day." "Wait, please," Skylar begged, chasing after him. "We can explain." I heard the front door slam shut. The sound of the realtor's car engine revving and speeding away followed seconds later. Silence fell over the house. Heavy, dangerous. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, panting, wiping the grease from my eyes. I had won the battle. The house was safe for now. But I knew the retaliation would be swift. Trayvon appeared at the top of the stairs. His face was twisted into a snarl I had never seen before. The mask of the good son was gone. All that was left was a desperate, broke man who had just lost his lottery ticket. "You ruined it," he whispered. "You ruined everything." He came down the stairs slowly, taking off his belt. I backed away, grabbing a rusted wrench from the workbench. "Stay back, Trayvon." He didn't listen. He lunged at me. He was younger, stronger, and fueled by rage. He knocked the wrench from my hand and shoved me backward. I tripped over the mattress and fell hard, my head slamming against the concrete floor. Before I could recover, he was on top of me. His hands grabbed the collar of my shirt, twisting it tight, cutting off my air. "Why won't you just die?" he screamed, shaking me. "Why do you have to make everything so hard? We could have been rich. We could have been happy." I looked into his eyes and saw only emptiness. There was no soul there, just greed and fear. "Hit me," I wheezed. "Go ahead, son. Kill me. Finish what you started." He raised his fist. I saw the gold wedding band on his finger glinting in the dim light. He was going to do it. He was going to beat his father to death in a basement for money. "Trayvon, stop!" Skylar's voice cracked like a whip from the top of the stairs. Trayvon froze his fist, hovering inches from my face. He looked up, panting. "He cost us $900,000, Skylar." "Let me shut him up." "No," Skylar said, walking down the stairs. Her face was calm, terrifyingly calm. She stepped over the mess I had made and stood over us. "If you beat him to death, we have a body to hide," she said coldly. "And Mr. Calloway knows he is here. He knows he is crazy, but he knows he is alive. If he turns up dead with bruises all over him, the police will ask questions." Trayvon lowered his hand, but he didn't let go of my collar. "So what do we do?" Skylar looked down at me. She looked at the grease on my face, the filth on my clothes. She curled her lip in disgust. "He wants to act like an animal, we treat him like one." She reached out and grabbed the bucket of waste I had kicked over. She set it upright. No more food, she said. No more water. Trayvon looked at her. Skylar, that will kill him. It will weaken him, she corrected. 3 days, Trayvon. Without food or water for 3 days, he will be too weak to scream, too weak to fight. He will be delirious. Real delirium, not this act. She leaned down until her face was inches from mine. The smell of her expensive perfume mixed with the stench of the basement. You want to play games, Jeff? She whispered. Let us play. Let us see how tough you are when your kidneys start to shut down. Let us see how loud you scream when your throat is dry as dust. She stood up and motioned to Trayvon. Come on, let him rot. Trayvon hesitated for a second, looking at me with a flicker of something that might have been guilt. But then he stood up, brushing the dust off his knees. He followed her up the stairs. The heavy door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked, and then I heard the sound of a drill. Trayvon was screwing the door shut. I lay on the cold concrete, listening to the whir of the power drill sealing my tomb. My body ached. My head spun. The hunger that had been a dull ache was now a sharp pain. But as the darkness swallowed me again, I felt a small spark of heat in my chest. It wasn't hope. It was something hotter. They thought they were starving a helpless old man. They didn't know they were sharpening a blade. I crawled back to the utility panel. My hands shook as I opened it. I needed to send a signal. I needed to reach the outside world. I looked at the pile of old electronics in the corner, a broken radio, a soldering iron, some copper wire. I had built radios out of scrap metal in the jungle during the service. I could do it here. I picked up the soldering iron. You want to starve me, Skylar, I whispered to the empty room. Fine, but you forgot one thing. Hunger makes the wolf hunt harder. 30 hours without food, 12 hours without water. The human body is a machine, and mine was running on fumes. My tongue felt like a piece of dry leather in my mouth, and a dull ache throbbed behind my eyes. I sat on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by the skeletons of old electronics. To Trayvon and Skylar, this was just a pile of junk waiting for the landfill. To a retired Navy electronics engineer, it was an arsenal. I had dragged the heavy box of scrap from the corner. My hands shook not from age, but from the hypoglycemia setting in. I forced myself to focus. I picked up an old broken baby monitor Trayvon had bought 5 years ago for a baby that never came. Cheap plastic. I smashed it against the floor, cracking the casing. Inside was a treasure, a circuit board with transistors and a crystal oscillator. I needed to build a transmitter. Not a voice transmitter that required too much power and complex modulation. I needed a simple CW transmitter. Continuous wave, Morse code. It was the language of survival. I fired up the soldering iron I had found. The smell of melting rosin filled the small airless room. It was the scent of my youth, the scent of the workshop on the USS Enterprise. I stripped the copper wiring from an old lamp using my teeth because my wire strippers were gone. The metallic taste mixed with the copper of my own blood from a split lip. I worked with a feverish intensity. I desoldered the crystal from the baby monitor. It was set to 49 megahertz. Too high for long range, but perfect for local interference. I needed to modify the frequency. I found a variable capacitor in an old AM radio tuner. If I bridged it correctly, I could pull the signal down into the amateur radio band. The 40-meter band, 7 megahertz, Clifford Banks, my old friend, my wingman. He lived 5 miles away in a house that looked like a porcupine because of all the antennas on the roof. Cliff was a ham radio operator. He spent his retirement listening to the static of the universe. He monitored the emergency frequencies day and night. If anyone could hear a whisper in the noise, it was Cliff. I built a Colpitts oscillator circuit on a piece of cardboard using thumbtacks as binding posts. It was crude, it was ugly, it was beautiful. I wired the 9-volt battery from the smoke detector in series with 2 AA batteries I found in a remote control, 12 volts. Enough to push a signal a few miles if the atmospheric conditions were right. I needed an antenna. The physics were immutable. For 7 megahertz, I needed length. I looked at the exposed water pipe running along the ceiling. It was copper. It ran through the whole house and out to the street. It was a perfect ground plane. For the radiator, I used a spool of speaker wire, unwinding it and draping it back and forth across the ceiling joists, creating a makeshift dipole. Finally, I fashioned a key. 2 strips of metal cut from a soup can separated by a piece of plastic. When I pressed them together, the circuit closed. I connected the power. The makeshift device hummed. I didn't have a speaker, so I couldn't hear the tone, but I could feel the tiny spark every time I tapped the metal strips. I checked my watch, but it was gone. I guessed it was around 2 a.m. The atmospheric noise would be lowest now. I placed my finger on the sharp edge of the tin can key. Dit, 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 da, 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 dit, dit, dit. SOS. I repeated it, over and over. My finger bled, but I didn't stop. SOS, DEWA4J. That was my call sign, Whiskey Alpha 4 Juliet. If Cliff heard that, he would know. He would know I wasn't dead. He would know I wasn't senile. I tapped for 20 minutes. My arm burned. The hunger cramps in my stomach were violent spasms now. I felt lightheaded. Maybe I was just tapping into the void. Maybe the signal wasn't getting out of this concrete tomb. I needed to know if he heard me. I grabbed the old AM radio I had scavenged. I couldn't transmit voice, but I could listen. I tuned the dial slowly, searching through the static. White noise, hissing, the chatter of a distant religious broadcast. Then I heard it. Faint, rhythmic, cutting through the static like a knife. Dit-da-dit-dit-dit-da-dit. NEF negative. No, that wasn't right. I listened closer, pressing the speaker to my ear. JEFF. Jeff. I almost dropped the radio. He heard me. Clifford heard me. I scrambled back to my transmitter. I tapped frantically. Cliff. Trapped. Skylar. Poison. I waited. The silence stretched out, terrifying and long. Had I lost him? Did the battery die? Then the radio chirped again. Police. I tapped back immediately. No. Inside job. Need proof. Bank. I needed him to freeze the money first. If the police came now, Skylar would claim I was having a mental breakdown. She would show them the mess I made, the grease on my face. They would believe the grieving daughter-in-law over the crazy old man playing with radios in the basement. I needed Cliff to hit them where it hurt. The money. I heard Cliff's reply. Understood. Hold fast. 73. 73. Best regards. It was the standard sign-off. He was gone. But he knew. The cavalry wasn't coming yet, but the scouts had been alerted. I slumped back against the wall, exhausted but triumphant. I had done it. I had breached the wall. Suddenly, a noise from above froze the blood in my veins. It wasn't the creak of the house settling. It was the distinct sound of the deadbolt sliding back. The drill whirred in reverse, removing the screws Trayvon had driven into the door frame. They were coming. Panic surged through me. I looked at my setup. The wires draped across the ceiling. The cardboard circuit board, the stripped electronics scattered on the floor. It looked exactly like what it was, a communication device. If Skylar saw this, she would know. She wasn't stupid. She would know I had reached out. And she would kill me tonight, not with starvation. She would come down here with a knife or a gun, and she would end it. She couldn't risk the police arriving. I had seconds. I ripped the speaker wire from the ceiling. I grabbed the cardboard transmitter, the battery, the radio, where to hide it. The mattress was too obvious. The tool chest was the first place they would look. My eyes darted around the room. The utility sink. Next to it was the main sewage cleanout line for the house. A 4-inch PVC pipe with a screw cap. I scrambled over to it. My fingers were slippery with sweat. I twisted the cap. It was stuck tight, sealed with years of grime. I grabbed the pipe wrench I had used to threaten Trayvon. I clamped it on and heaved. My back screamed in protest. The cap gave way with a sickening crack. The smell of raw sewage billowed out, forcing me to gag. I didn't hesitate. I shoved the transmitter, the wires, and the battery into the dark sludge. I pushed them down deep past the elbow of the pipe. I screwed the cap back on just as the door at the top of the stairs flew open. Light poured down. I threw myself onto the mattress, pulling the scratchy blanket over my messy clothes, trying to look like I had been sleeping. Heavy footsteps descended the stairs. It wasn't Trayvon. The gate was too light, too sharp. Skylar. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, a flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. She swept the light over the room. It landed on the pile of broken electronics. "What are you doing down here, Jeff?" she asked. Her voice was suspicious, tight. I heard tapping. Rhythmic tapping. Like a woodpecker. I sat up, feigning grogginess. I rubbed my eyes, smearing more grease across my forehead. "Rats," I mumbled, my voice raspy from thirst. "Big rats." I was throwing shoes at them. Skylar walked into the room. She was wearing a silk nightgown and holding a glass of wine. She looked out of place like a diamond in a sewer. She kicked the pile of broken plastic. "You smashed the baby monitor." "Why?" "It was watching me," I whispered, widening my eyes, trying to sell the madness. The red eye. It was watching. She stared at me with cold calculation. She didn't buy it, not entirely. She walked around the room, the flashlight beam hunting. She paused at the utility sink. She sniffed the air. "It smells like ozone down here," she said. "Like burning metal." And shit. I opened the drain, I said, looking for water. "I am so thirsty, Skylar. Please, just a sip." I reached out a trembling hand toward her wine glass. She recoiled, stepping back as if I were contagious. "Don't touch me," she snapped. She shone the light on my face, blinding me. "You are disgusting. Look at you. You used to be a man of dignity. Now look at you." She walked over to the sewage pipe. She shined the light on the cap. I held my breath. I had tightened it by hand. Were there scratch marks from the wrench? She stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked back at me. "You are up to something," she said quietly. "I can smell it. You are not crazy, Jeff. You are plotting." She walked back to the stairs. "Trayvon," she yelled up. "Trayvon, get down here." My son appeared at the top of the stairs looking sleepy and miserable. "What is it, Skylar?" "Bring the handcuffs," she ordered. "What? Why?" "Because your father is busy. He is breaking things. He is opening pipes. I don't trust him." Trayvon came down carrying a pair of zip ties. "We don't have handcuffs, Skylar." "These will do," she said. She pointed at the support pillar in the center of the room. "A steel lally column. Tie him to the post." "No," I begged. "Please. I can't move. I am weak." "Do it." "Trayvon," she screamed. "Or do you want him to burn the house down while we sleep? He was messing with electronics." "Look at this mess." Trayvon grabbed my arms. He dragged me off the mattress. I didn't have the strength to fight him. He pulled me to the pillar and forced my arms around it. He cinched the zip ties tight around my wrists. The plastic bit into my skin, cutting off circulation. "There," Skylar said, satisfied. "Now you can't touch anything." She leaned in close. "I don't know what you were doing, Jeff. But it doesn't matter. Tomorrow the lawyer comes with the papers. You will sign, and then you can rot here until you die." She turned and walked up the stairs. Trayvon lingered for a second. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. "But you have to stop fighting. You are making it worse." He turned off the light. The door slammed. The drill whirred again, sealing me in. I was tied to a pole in the dark. My shoulders ached. My wrists bled. The smell of sewage hung heavy in the air. But in the darkness, I smiled. They had tied my hands. But they were too late. The signal was out. The wolf was at the door. And Clifford Banks was not a man who ignored an SOS. I rested my head against the cold steel of the pillar and waited. The hunger was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't just physical hunger. It was a hunger for justice. And I was about to be fed. Morning arrived not with the warmth of the sun, but with the heavy thud of boots on the floorboards above my head. I had spent the night tied to the steel lally column, my arms numb and my throat so dry I could barely swallow. The zip ties bit into my wrists and the smell of the sewage I had unleashed burned my nostrils. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, my mind playing tricks on me, showing me images of Etta waiting for me in the garden. But then the doorbell rang. It wasn't the frantic ringing of a delivery driver. It was a long, authoritative press. I heard Skylar's heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I heard the muffled sound of the front door opening. "Who are you?" I heard her ask, her voice sharp with suspicion. "City Power and Light, ma'am," a deep, gravelly voice replied. "We detected a massive power surge and a frequency irregularity coming from this address. It could be a fire hazard. We need to check the main breaker immediately. Clifford." My heart leaped in my chest. He had come. He had used the exact cover story I would have chosen. The frequency irregularity was the signal I had sent. He was turning my distress call into a legitimate work order. Skylar hesitated. "We didn't call anyone. Everything is fine. Ma'am, if I don't inspect the box, I have to cut power to the grid sector for safety," the voice insisted. It will take 5 minutes. The breaker is in the basement, right? The basement. Skylar hated the basement, and right now it smelled like a cesspool. Fine, she snapped, but make it quick, and ignore the mess. We have a plumbing issue. I heard heavy footsteps coming toward the pantry door. The drill whirred, removing the screws that sealed my tomb. The door opened and light spilled down the stairs. Stay up here, Skylar ordered. I don't want you slipping in the filth. The boots descended the stairs, heavy work boots. I looked up through my swollen eyes. A large figure in a neon safety vest and a hard hat filled the stairwell. He carried a heavy tool belt and a clipboard. He reached the bottom and turned his flashlight on me. For a second, Clifford Banks stopped cold. I saw his eyes widen behind his safety glasses. He took in the zip ties, the bruises on my face, the filth covering me. His jaw tightened, and I saw his hand drift toward the hammer on his belt. He wanted to kill them. I saw it in his eyes. But Cliff was a professional. He knew the mission. He looked back up the stairs. "Yeah, ma'am, you got a serious short down here," he yelled, his voice echoing. "I need to test the load. Stay back. There might be sparks." He blocked the view from the stairs with his massive frame. He moved to me quickly, dropping to one knee. He didn't say a word. He pulled a small knife from his belt and sliced the zip ties. I groaned as the blood rushed back into my hands. "Don't move," he whispered, barely audible. "Stay tied. Loose, but tied. If they know you are free, they will kill you." He reached into his vest. He pulled out a small black object, a burner phone, an old Nokia brick, and a folded piece of paper. He shoved them into the waistband of my trousers, hiding them under my shirt. Then he pressed something into my hand, a protein bar and a small flask of water. "Drink." "Now," he commanded. I downed the water in 2 gulps, the cool liquid shocking my system back to life. I shoved the wrapper of the bar into my pocket. Cliff grabbed the zip ties and arranged them so it looked like I was still bound. He squeezed my shoulder hard, a silent promise. "I am holding the money," he whispered. "Banks are frozen. Police are watching. But we need the smoking gun, Jeff. We need them to hang themselves." He stood up and walked to the utility panel. He banged on it with a wrench, making enough noise to cover any whisper. "All right, ma'am," he shouted. "I reset the main. You should be good, but you need to get a plumber down here. That smell is a code violation." He walked back to the stairs. He stopped for 1 second and looked at me. He tapped his chest over his heart. Then he was gone. The door slammed. The drill whirred again. I was alone in the dark, but I wasn't helpless anymore. I waited until the footsteps faded. I pulled the phone from my waistband. It was fully charged. Cliff had preloaded it with the app linked to my cloud server. I took a bite of the protein bar, chewing slowly, letting the sugar and carbs hit my bloodstream. My brain started to clear. The fog lifted. I turned on the phone, keeping the screen dim. I opened the app. The feed from the living room appeared. Skylar was standing by the window, watching Cliff's truck drive away. Trayvon was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. "That was close," Skylar said. "Too close. We need to finish this today, Trayvon." "I can't do it, Skylar." Trayvon moaned. "I can't kill him. I can't watch him starve. It is inhumane." "You won't have to watch," she said. "You are going to the lawyer's office. Get the paperwork ready. I will handle things here." "You?" Trayvon asked. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to make sure he is comfortable," she said. "Just go." Trayvon stood up. He looked like a ghost. He grabbed his keys and left. I watched Skylar. As soon as Trayvon's car pulled out of the driveway, her demeanor changed. She didn't look worried anymore. She looked excited. She pulled out her phone and made a call. "He is gone," she said. "Come over." "Yeah, the old man is in the basement. He is out of the picture. No, don't worry about the husband. He is a spineless worm." I frowned. Who was she calling? 20 minutes later, a car pulled into the driveway. A sleek black sports car. A man got out. I recognized him instantly from the dossier I had compiled on Trayvon's debts. It was Vincent "Vinny" Moretti, the loan shark, the man who was threatening to break Trayvon's legs. Skylar opened the door before he could knock. She threw her arms around him and kissed him. It wasn't a friendly kiss. It was passionate, possessive. I stared at the small screen, my stomach churning. They walked into the living room. Vinny threw his jacket on the sofa. "So is it done?" he asked, lighting a cigarette and ashing it on my floor. "Almost," Skylar said, pouring him a drink. "He is trapped downstairs. Trayvon thinks we are just pressuring him to sign the house over. He thinks we are going to sell it, pay you off, and live happily ever after." Vinny laughed. "And what does Trayvon think will happen to the old man? He thinks we are putting him in a home." Skylar giggled. "The idiot. He doesn't have the stomach for what needs to happen." "And what needs to happen?" Vinny asked, pulling her close. Skylar ran a hand down his chest. "Once the papers are signed, the old man has an accident, a fall down the stairs, or maybe a gas leak. We haven't decided. But here's the best part, Vinny." "What, babe?" "We frame Trayvon," she said. I froze. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "We frame him." Skylar continued, her voice dripping with malice. "My fingerprints aren't on anything downstairs. Trayvon locked the door. Trayvon bought the zip ties. Trayvon has the motive. Everyone knows he has gambling debts. Everyone knows he is desperate." She took a sip of wine. "Once the house is sold and the money is in the offshore account, we transfer it. Then I call the police. I tell them my husband went crazy. He killed his father for the insurance money. I was terrified. I couldn't stop him." Vinny whistled low and appreciative. "You are cold, Sky. That is why I love you." "Trayvon goes to prison for life," Skylar said. "The old man is dead. And you and I are $2 million richer on a beach in Rio." She kissed him again. "And nobody will ever know." I sat in the darkness, the glow of the phone illuminating my face. The pieces fell into place with a terrifying clarity. Trayvon wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't even a partner. He was the weapon. Skylar was using his desperation, his weakness, and his greed to kill me, and then she was going to discard him like a used casing. My anger shifted. For the last 24 hours, I had hated my son. I had wanted to hurt him. I had wanted to make him pay for betraying me. But now, looking at the screen, seeing the woman he loved plotting his destruction, I felt something else. Pity. Trayvon was a fool. He was weak. He was lazy. He had made terrible choices. But he was my son, and he was being played. Skylar had manipulated him. She had driven him into debt. She had whispered poison in his ear until he turned on his own father. And now she was going to send him to prison for a crime she orchestrated. I looked at my wrists, still red and raw from the ties. I looked at the bucket in the corner. Trayvon had done this to me. He deserved punishment. He deserved to lose his inheritance. He deserved to face the consequences of his actions. But he didn't deserve to go down for her. I took a deep breath. The air in the basement was still foul, but my head was clear. I didn't just want to escape anymore. Escaping was too easy. If I escaped now, the police would arrest both of them. Trayvon would go to jail. Skylar might cut a deal. She might flip on him. No, that wasn't good enough. I needed to save my son. But I couldn't save him by hugging him. I couldn't save him by forgiving him. He was too far gone for that. I had to break him. I had to show him exactly what he had married. I had to strip away his illusions. I had to let him see the monster in his bed. And then when he was broken, when he had nothing left, I would offer him a choice. Redemption or ruin. I looked at the phone again. Skylar and Vinny were heading upstairs. To my bedroom. "You think you are smart, Skylar," I whispered. "You think you are playing chess. But you forgot one thing. You are playing against a man who used to track submarines in the dark. I can see you, and I am going to sink you." I ate the rest of the protein bar. I drank the water. I felt my strength returning. I leaned back against the pillar, my hands resting loosely in the cut zip ties. Let them have their fun. Let them think they had won. Tonight, the old Jefferson Moore died in this basement. The man who was coming out of this room wasn't a father. He wasn't a victim. He was the judge, the jury, and the executioner, and court was about to be in session. The heavy oak door at the top of the stairs creaked open, dragging me out of a fitful doze. My arms were still numb from the zip ties, and my back screamed in protest against the steel pillar, but my mind snapped instantly into focus. It was time. Skylar had said the lawyer was coming today. This was the moment they would try to steal my legacy. I slumped forward, letting my head hang low, feigning the stupor of a dying man. I heard 3 sets of footsteps descending the stairs. Skylar led the way, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. Trayvon followed his tread, heavy and reluctant. Bringing up the rear was a man who smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. I watched them through half-closed lids. The lawyer was a small, sweaty man in a suit that looked 2 sizes too big. He carried a leather briefcase and kept dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked around the basement with distaste, his eyes lingering on the bucket in the corner and the filth on my clothes. "This is highly irregular, Mrs. Moore," the lawyer muttered. "The client is restrained. The environment is non-clinical. Just do your job," Mr. Finch, Schuyler snapped. She walked over to me and kicked my shoe. "Wake up, Jeff. You have a visitor." I groaned, lifting my head slowly. I let my eyes wander unfocused, blinking against the light. Who is there?" I rasped, my voice cracking from thirst. "It is your lawyer, Dad," Trayvon said, his voice trembling. "He has the papers, the ones we talked about, for your care." I looked at Trayvon. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He was staring at the floor, his hands wringing together. Mr. Finch stepped forward, pulling a thick document from his briefcase. He didn't look me in the eye either. He placed the papers on a dusty crate near the pillar. "Mr. Moore, I am Arthur Finch. I have prepared the last will and testament along with the durable power of attorney as requested by your son. These documents transfer all assets, including the property, patent rights, and existing liquid funds, to Trayvon and Schuyler Moore. Do you understand?" "I understand," I whispered. "You are stealing from me." Mr. Finch cleared his throat nervously. He looked at Schuyler. "He seems cognizant. If he is under duress—" "He is not under duress," Schuyler hissed. She grabbed a bottle of water from a nearby shelf and held it to my lips. "Drink, old man." I drank greedily, letting water spill down my chin. It was part of the act. The desperate animal. "He is just confused," she told the lawyer. "He thinks everyone is stealing from him. It is the dementia. We went over this. Just get the signature." Finch sighed. He pulled a pen from his pocket. "All right. Mr. Moore, please sign on the line marked with the X." He held the pen out to me. Schuyler cut the zip tie on my right hand, freeing it. My arm fell to my side like a dead weight. "Sign it," Jeff Schuyler ordered. "And this will all be over. We will move you upstairs. You can sleep in a bed." I lifted my hand. It shook violently. I wasn't faking the tremors entirely. The lack of food and the stress had taken their toll. I reached for the pen, but my fingers fumbled. It clattered to the concrete floor. "Pick it up," Schuyler shouted. I tried again. I grasped the pen, but my grip was weak. I brought it to the paper. The tip hovered over the line. I let my hand spasm. The pen flew out of my fingers and rolled under the mattress. "He can't do it," Trayvon said, his voice thick with relief. "He is too weak, Schuyler. He can't sign." Schuyler looked furious. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it until her nails dug into my skin. "You are doing this on purpose," she whispered, her face inches from mine. I stared at her, my eyes wide and vacant. I can't. My hands—" She threw my hand down in disgust. "Useless. He is useless." Mr. Finch looked at his watch. "If he cannot sign due to physical infirmity, we can use a thumbprint attestation. It is legal in this state as long as there are 2 witnesses. I can witness and—" "I will witness," Schuyler said quickly. "No beneficiaries cannot be witnesses," Finch corrected. Trayvon, then Schuyler said. "Fine," Finch said. He pulled an ink pad from his bag. Schuyler grabbed my wrist again. She yanked my hand toward the crate. She pressed my thumb onto the black ink pad, rolling it roughly. "Make a mark, Jeff," she growled. She forced my thumb down onto the paper. I felt the pressure of her hand crushing mine. I didn't resist. I let her grind my thumb into the signature line. "There," she said, lifting my hand. "Done." Finch inspected the mark. "It is a bit smudged, but it is identifiable. I will notarize it." I slumped back against the pillar. Inside my chest, my heart was hammering a rhythm of triumph. They thought they had won. They thought they had captured my identity in a smear of black ink. But they didn't know about the wood glue. 2 hours ago, while the house was silent, I had crawled to the workbench. I found a bottle of carpenter's glue, dried and crusty around the cap. I managed to squeeze out a small glob. I smeared a thin layer over the pad of my right thumb. It was an old spy trick. A layer of glue fills in the ridges of the fingerprint. It dries clear and hard, creating a smooth surface, or if applied unevenly, a distorted texture that bears no resemblance to the original print. I had sat there for an hour, blowing on my thumb, letting it dry. It felt like a second skin, tight and smooth. When Schuyler pressed my thumb to that paper, she wasn't recording Jefferson Moore's print. She was recording a smudge of dried glue. Any forensic document examiner would look at that print and see a blob. They would see that the ridge detail was missing. They would prove that the print was obscured or tampered with. The will would be contested. It would be thrown out of court. I watched Finch pack up his papers. He looked relieved to be leaving. "Congratulations, Mrs. Moore," he said. "You now have full control. I will file these with the county clerk in the morning." "Thank you, Arthur," Schuyler said, her mood instantly brightening. She looked at me with a sneer. "See, Jeff, that wasn't so hard. Now you can relax. You don't have to worry about money anymore." She didn't move me upstairs. She didn't offer me a bed. She motioned to Trayvon. "Tie him up again." Trayvon looked at her. "But you said—" "I said what I had to say to get the signature," Schuyler snapped. "Do you want him wandering around while we celebrate? Tie him up." Trayvon knelt beside me. He wouldn't look at my face. He secured my hand back to the pillar with a fresh zip tie. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered so low Schuyler couldn't hear. They left me there in the dark again. The door slammed. The lock clicked. I waited. I let the adrenaline fade. I scraped the glue off my thumb using the sharp edge of the zip tie clasp. The little flakes of dried glue fell into the dust evidence of my victory, disappearing into the filth. Hours passed. The hunger returned, a gnawing beast in my gut. I closed my eyes, trying to conserve energy. Then the door opened again. It was quiet this time, stealthy, no drill, just the soft click of the lock. Light spilled down the stairs, but it was blocked by a large shadow. Trayvon. He came down slowly, holding something in his hand. He looked over his shoulder, terrified. He crept toward me. He didn't turn on the main light. The illumination from the hallway upstairs was enough to see his face. It was ravaged by guilt. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. "Dad," he whispered. He knelt in front of me. In his hand was a bagel wrapped in a paper towel. It was plain dry, but to me it looked like a feast. "You have to eat something," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't let you starve." She is crazy, Dad." I didn't know she would go this far. He held the bagel to my mouth. I took a bite, chewing slowly. It tasted like cardboard, but my stomach welcomed it. "Trayvon," I whispered, swallowing hard. "You can stop this. Go to the police. Tell them she forced you." "I can't," he sobbed quietly. "She has recordings, Dad. She recorded me buying the zip ties. She has texts where I agreed to the plan. She said if I go to the police, she will tell them I planned it all, that I wanted you dead for the inheritance." He fed me another bite. "She owns me, Dad. I am trapped." Before I could answer, the lights snapped on. Trayvon flinched, dropping the bagel in the dirt. Schuyler stood at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a cocktail dress ready for her party. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was low, calm, and terrifying. Trayvon scrambled backwards, scrambling away from me like a frightened child. I was just checking on him." He looked pale. "You were feeding him," Schuyler screamed. She flew down the stairs, her heels clacking like gunshots. She kicked the bagel across the room. "We agreed, Trayvon. We agreed he needed to be weak. He is my father," Schuyler Trayvon yelled, standing up. "He is a human being. We can't just starve him to death. We have the papers. We won. Why do we have to torture him? Because he is dangerous, you idiot," she shrieked. She slapped him. The sound echoed off the concrete walls. It wasn't a slap of passion. It was a slap of ownership. It was hard, brutal, and humiliating. Trayvon stumbled back, holding his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. "You are a spineless worm," Schuyler spat, stepping into his space, pushing him back. "You are nothing without me. Do you think you would have this house without me? Do you think you would have a future? You are a loser, Trayvon, a broke, pathetic loser who can't even kill his own father to save his wife." I watched from my pillar. My hand moved to my waist, finding the burner phone Cliff had hidden on me. I pressed the button to wake the screen. The camera app was still running, recording everything to the cloud. "Look at you," she taunted, poking Trayvon in the chest, crying over a bagel. "You make me sick." "I should have left you months ago. I should have run off with Vinny then. At least he is a real man. At least he knows how to do what needs to be done." Vinny Trayvon asked, his voice trembling. You and Vinny," Schuyler laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "Oh, grow up, Trev. Who do you think negotiated your debt? Who do you think came up with this plan? Vinny has more brains in his little finger than you have in your whole empty head." She grabbed him by the jaw, forcing him to look at her. "Now listen to me. You are going to go upstairs. You are going to wash your face. You are going to put on your suit, and you are going to smile for the guests. Because if you mess this up, Trevon, if you show 1 ounce of weakness tonight, I will ruin you. I will frame you for everything. I will tell the police you beat your father. I will tell them you poisoned him. I will walk away with the money, and you will rot in a cell next to your daddy. Do you understand me? Trevon nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Skylar. Good. Now get upstairs. The guests will be here in an hour. She shoved him toward the stairs. Trevon stumbled up, looking back at me one last time. He looked broken, shattered. Skylar turned to me. She smoothed her dress, fixing her hair. Don't get comfortable, Jeff, she said. Tonight is a celebration, and you are the guest of honor. Or rather, your ghost is. She turned off the light. I sat in the dark, the burner phone warm in my hand. I had it. I had the assault. I had the confession of the affair. I had the threat of framing him. I had everything I needed to destroy her. But I wasn't done. Skylar thought she had broken my son. She thought she had turned him into a slave. But she had made a mistake. She had pushed him too far. She had revealed her true face. I looked at the bagel lying in the dust. I reached out as far as the zip tie would allow and snagged it. I brushed off the dirt and ate it. I needed the strength. Because tonight I wasn't just going to escape, I was going to crash the party, and I was going to bring the whole house down on top of her. The basement ceiling vibrated with the heavy bass of electronic music. It was a grotesque soundtrack to my imprisonment. Above me, my house had been transformed into a nightclub for the vultures Skylar called friends. I sat in the dirt, my stomach hollow and aching, listening to the clinking of glass and the high-pitched shrieks of laughter filtering down through the floorboards. It had been an hour since Skylar had ordered Trevon upstairs to play the part of the dutiful husband, but now the door opened again. Skylar descended the stairs in a cloud of expensive perfume that failed to mask the lingering stench of sewage I had unleashed earlier. She was wearing a shimmering gold dress that hugged every curve a trophy wife on display, but her eyes were hard, flinty stones. Behind her, Trevon looked like a man marching to the gallows. He was wearing his best suit, but it hung loosely on his frame, and his tie was crooked. He carried a tray of half-eaten appetizers, leftovers from the party prep. Eat, Skylar ordered, kicking the tray toward me. You look like a corpse. I do not want you dying before the night is over. It would ruin the mood. I looked at the food, stale crackers, cold shrimp. I ate them with my hands, ignoring the humiliation. I needed the calories. I needed the fuel for what was coming. Trevon stood by the pillar, his head bowed. He held a bottle of champagne and a towel over his arm like a waiter. Skylar snapped her fingers at him. Don't just stand there pouring drinks for ghosts, Trev. Get him up. The smell down here is getting worse. If the guests catch a whiff of this sewer gas, they will leave. We are moving him. Trevon looked up alarmed. Moving him where? The guests are everywhere. To the utility closet in the hallway, Skylar hissed. It has a lock. It is soundproof. And it is far away from the party. Put a gag on him if you have to. Just get him out of this hole before he stinks up the whole house. Trevon hesitated, looking at me with those pleading eyes I had come to despise. Skylar stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Do not make me ask twice. Vinny is upstairs. He is asking why his favorite investment partner is hiding in the basement. Do you want me to send him down here? Trevon flinched. No, I will do it. He walked over to me and cut the zip tie attaching me to the pillar. He pulled me to my feet. My legs were like jelly. I stumbled and he caught me, his grip firm but shaking. I am sorry, Dad, he whispered in my ear as he hauled me toward the stairs. Just be quiet, please. We ascended into the light. The kitchen was a war zone of catering trays and empty bottles. Through the open door to the living room, I saw a crowd of strangers drinking my liquor and laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. They looked like predators, sharks in designer suits and cocktail dresses. Vinny was there holding court by the fireplace, his hand resting possessively on the mantel where Etta's photos used to be. Skylar draped a heavy wool blanket over my head, covering my face and filth-stained clothes. If anyone asks, he is the drunk uncle we are putting to bed, she muttered to Trevon. Walk fast. They marched me through the edge of the kitchen and into the main hallway. The noise of the party was deafening here. I could smell the roast beef and the expensive cologne. I felt the heat of bodies pressing close. A woman laughed right next to me, her voice shrill. Oh, poor thing, is he okay? She asked. Just a little too much punch, Skylar said smoothly, her voice bright and charming. We are just letting him sleep it off. They shoved me into the small coat closet under the main staircase. It was a cramped space filled with winter coats and boxes of holiday decorations. The air was stifling hot and smelled of cedar and mothballs. "Sit," Trayvon ordered, pushing me down onto a pile of boots. I collapsed into the corner. Skylar leaned in her gold dress, shimmering in the sliver of light from the hallway. "Not a sound, Jeff," she whispered. "If you make one noise, Vinny will come in here and finish the job, and this time he won't make it look like an accident." She slammed the door. The lock clicked. I was in total darkness again, buried under coats. The heat was oppressive. Sweat immediately began to bead on my forehead. The bass from the music thumped against the door, vibrating in my chest. I could hear them just outside. Skylar greeting guests. Trayvon taking coats, though he didn't open this door. He just piled them on a chair nearby. He was a servant in his own house, a prisoner in a suit. But they had made a mistake, a critical, tactical error. They had moved me out of the concrete bunker of the basement. They had moved me to the center of the house. And right on the other side of the drywall behind my head was the central networking hub. I could feel the heat radiating from the router mounted on the wall in the adjacent study. I could hear the faint electronic whine of the cooling fans. I was less than 6 inches away from the digital heart of the house. I reached into my waistband and pulled out the burner phone Cliff had given me. In the basement, the signal had been weak, barely 1 bar. Here in the closet, the signal strength meter was full, 5 bars of LTE. I checked the battery, 80%, enough to start a war. I opened the text messaging app. I typed 2 words, Omega Go. I hit send. I waited. The seconds ticked by, marked only by the pounding of the music outside. Had Cliff fallen asleep? Had he been caught? The phone vibrated in my hand. 1 word. Executing. I let out a breath and leaned my head against the wall. The Omega Protocol. It was a failsafe I had designed years ago, not for my family but for intruders. It was a complete system override, a backdoor that bypassed the standard user interface and accessed the root kernel of the smart home controller. Skylar thought she controlled this house because she had the app on her phone. She thought she was the master because she could change the temperature or dim the lights. She was a tourist. I was the architect. I closed my eyes and visualized what was happening outside in the black van parked down the street. Cliff was sitting at his console, his fingers flying across a keyboard. He was injecting code into my network using the credentials I had provided. He was seizing control of every screen, every speaker, every smart lock, and every camera in the house. Inside the closet, I pulled up the camera feed on the burner phone. The connection was instantaneous and crystal clear. I saw the living room. It was packed. Skylar was standing on a chair holding a glass of champagne. She was tapping it with a spoon, calling for attention. The music lowered slightly. "Friends, partners, visionaries," she announced, her voice projecting with practiced confidence. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We are celebrating a new chapter. A massive investment opportunity that is going to change everything for us." The crowd cheered. Vinny clapped loudly, a smug grin on his face. Trayvon stood in the corner holding a tray of empty glasses, looking like he wanted to disappear. I looked at the phone. A new menu had appeared on the screen. It was the command console Cliff had unlocked. It was a list of options: lighting, audio, video, security. I scrolled down. I found the option I needed. Master override. I tapped it. A sub-menu opened. Source select. I selected Cloud Archive. Skylar was still talking. "My father-in-law, bless his heart, was a man of limited vision," she said, her face twisting into a mask of mock sympathy. "He held on to this property for sentimental reasons. But we know that progress requires sacrifice. We are going to develop this land into something beautiful, something profitable." I scrolled through the video files stored in the cloud. I found the file from yesterday morning, the kitchen, the pills. I found the file from the bedroom, the affair, the plot to frame Trayvon. I found the file from earlier today, the racial slurs, the hatred. I selected them all. I added them to a playlist. Playlist, ready. The screen flashed. Skylar raised her glass. To the future, she toasted. To moving on. I hovered my thumb over the execute button. To the future, Skylar, I whispered in the darkness of the closet. I pressed the button. The effect was instantaneous. The music cut out with a sharp electronic screech that made the guests wince. The lights in the living room flickered once, twice, and then died completely, plunging the party into darkness. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed nervously. Just a fuse, Skylar shouted, her voice tight. Trayvon checked the breaker, but before Trayvon could move, a low hum began to fill the room. It wasn't the music. It was the sound of the motorized projector screen descending from the ceiling. I had installed it for movie nights with Etta. Skylar had probably forgotten it existed. At the same time, every smart TV in the house, 3 of them mounted on the walls, flickered to life. They didn't show cable. They didn't show Netflix. They showed a solid black screen with white text. System override. What is going on? Vinny demanded, his voice booming in the silence. Skylar laughed nervously. It must be a prank. Trayvon, fix it. Trayvon was tapping frantically on his phone. I am trying, Skylar. The app isn't working. I am locked out. Suddenly, the screens changed. The black background disappeared, replaced by a high-definition video feed. It was the kitchen. Bright, clear, and undeniable. The timestamp in the corner read yesterday, 9:02 p.m. The audio kicked in, booming through the surround sound speakers I had calibrated to perfection. Just 3 more pills. Skylar's voice echoed through the room, amplified and crisp. Her face filled the massive projector screen, contorted in that sneer I knew so well. It will look like a natural cardiac arrest. The crowd in the living room went silent, dead silent. On the screen, Skylar was crushing the blue pills. The sound of the spoon against the counter was like a gunshot. He is 70 years old. Nobody investigates when an old man dies in his sleep. I heard a gasp from the guests. I saw Vinny's face go pale in the glow of the screen. In the closet, I watched the chaos unfold on my small phone screen. Skylar was standing on the chair, her mouth open, her champagne glass slipping from her fingers. It hit the floor and shattered. "Turn it off," she shrieked. "Turn it off now." She threw the remote control at the screen, but it bounced off harmlessly. The video continued. Trayvon walked into the frame on the screen. "But what about the autopsy, Skylar? Don't be such a coward, Trev. Once he is gone, this house is ours." The guests were backing away. They were looking from the screen to Skylar, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror. These were greedy people. Yes, but murder was a line even they hesitated to cross, especially when caught in 4K resolution. "This is fake!" Skylar screamed, jumping down from the chair. "It is a deep fake. Someone hacked us. Trayvon, do something." But the show wasn't over. The video cut to black for a split second, and then a new scene appeared. The master bedroom. Skylar and Vinny. I saw Vinny's eyes widen in the living room. He lunged toward the projector, trying to rip it down, but it was mounted 10 feet high. On the screen, Skylar was laughing. "We framed Trayvon," she said, her voice casual and cruel. "We tell the police my husband went crazy. He killed his father." I watched Trayvon in the corner of the living room. He was staring at the screen, his face slack with shock. He was watching his wife destroy him. He was hearing the truth for the first time. Trayvon goes to prison for life. The old man is dead, and you and I are $2 million richer. The video cut again. This time it was just audio accompanied by a still image of Skylar's face. "Those stupid friends of yours, Trayvon. Those dumb black idiots. They don't know anything about money. They are just props." I heard the collective intake of breath from the room. Many of the guests were Trayvon's college friends. Successful black professionals. Skylar had smiled in their faces an hour ago. Now her voice was dripping with hate. In the closet, I stood up. The air was still hot, but I felt cold steel in my spine. I pushed the coats aside. I put my hand on the doorknob. Outside, the room was in chaos. People were shouting. Skylar was screaming at Vinny. Trayvon was on his knees. It was time. I kicked the door. The lock was flimsy, a simple privacy latch. It gave way with a splintering crack. I stepped out of the closet. I brushed the lint from my shoulders. I straightened my spine, ignoring the pain in my back. The hallway was dark, but the light from the living room screen spilled out, illuminating me. I walked into the living room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. They stared at me. The dead man walking. The ghost. I looked terrible. My face was bruised, my clothes were stained with grease and dirt, but I held my head high. Skylar saw me. She stopped screaming. She stared at me, her face draining of all color. I walked to the center of the room. I picked up the microphone from the karaoke machine Skylar had set up for later. I tapped it once. It was live. Cliff had activated it. "The party is over," I said, my voice booming through the speakers, drowning out the murmurs. But the trial is just beginning. I looked at Skylar. You wanted a show, Skylar. You wanted to be the star. I pointed at the screen where her face was still frozen in a loop of hate. Take a bow. The air in the closet was stifling hot, but my blood ran cold as ice. Through the crack in the door and the high-definition feed on the burner phone, I watched Skylar ascend her throne. She had dragged a velvet armchair to the center of the living room and stood upon it, her golden heels sinking into the fabric. She raised a crystal flute of vintage Dom Perignon, a bottle she had stolen from my private cellar. The room fell silent. 50 faces looked up at her. These were the elite of Atlanta, or at least the people Skylar desperately wanted to be. There were bankers, real estate developers, and a dozen of Trayvon's old college friends, successful black men and women who Skylar usually tolerated with a tight smile. Tonight, however, she was radiant. She was the queen of a kingdom built on murder and lies. To new beginnings, she announced, her voice ringing clear and charming. To leaving the past where it belongs. Buried. The guests laughed politely. Vinny stood at her feet, leaning against the chair like a guard dog, looking smug in a suit that cost more than my car. He caught her eye and winked. It was a subtle gesture, but on the small screen of my phone, it looked like a neon sign. Skylar continued. We have faced challenges. We have dealt with difficult family burdens. But Trayvon and I have persevered. And now, thanks to this incredible investment opportunity, we are ready to build a legacy. A legacy that isn't weighed down by the outdated thinking of the previous generation. She looked over at Trayvon, who was standing by the kitchen door holding a tray of empty hors d'oeuvre plates. He looked small, defeated. He tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace of pain. To freedom, Skylar shouted, raising the glass higher. To freedom, the room echoed. I stared at the execute button on the phone screen. My thumb hovered over it. You want freedom, Skylar, I whispered. I will give you freedom. Freedom from your lies. Freedom from your greed. I pressed the button. The effect was not subtle. It was violent. The heavy bass of the house music cut out, instantly replaced by a sharp electronic screech that tore through the speakers. The crystal chandelier flickered once, twice, and then died, plunging the room into a heavy, sudden darkness. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass, and it shattered on the hardwood. Trayvon, check the breakers. Skylar's voice cut through the dark, annoyed but not panicked yet. Probably just the old wiring. I told you we needed to gut this place. But Trayvon didn't have time to move. A low mechanical hum filled the room. The motorized projector screen descended from the ceiling niche above the fireplace. At the same time, the three 70-inch smart televisions mounted on the surrounding walls flashed to life. They didn't show the cable menu. They didn't show static. They showed a date and timestamp in bold white font against a black background. Yesterday, 9:02 p.m. The light from the screens bathed the room in a ghostly blue glow, illuminating the confused faces of the guests. Skylar was still standing on the chair, frozen, her glass halfway to her mouth. Then the video began. The sound was deafening. I had set the system volume to maximum. The crunch of the metal spoon against the granite countertop sounded like bones breaking. On the screen, clear as day, was the kitchen. Skylar stood at the island. She looked different without her party makeup. She looked predatory. The guests watched as digital Skylar opened a plastic bag and shook out 3 blue pills. They watched as she crushed them into a fine powder. They watched as she swept the powder into my orange juice. What is this? Vinny shouted, his voice cracking. Who put this up? On the screen, Trayvon walked into the frame. Are you sure about the dosage, Skylar? Digital Trayvon asked, his voice trembling. Skylar's laugh boomed through the living room surround sound. Stop being such a coward, Trev. 3 of these mixed with his normal medication will drop his heart rate to nothing. It will look like a natural cardiac arrest. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock hitting the walls. In the living room, the real Skylar dropped her champagne glass. It hit the chair and bounced, splashing wine over Vinny's shoes. Turn it off, she screamed, her voice shrill and terrified. Trayvon, turn it off. It is a fake. It is AI. But the video didn't stop. It cut to black and then a new timestamp appeared. Today, 2:15 p.m., master bedroom. The image shifted. It was my bedroom. Skylar was on the bed, my bed, wearing nothing but a silk robe. Vinny was beside her, buttoning his shirt. The real Vinny in the living room lunged toward the projector screen, waving his arms as if he could block the image with his body. Hey, cut the feed! He roared, looking around wildly for the source. On the screen, Skylar was pouring wine. "He is trapped downstairs," she said, her digital face glowing with malice. "Traven thinks we are just pressuring him. He thinks we are going to sell Pay You Off and live happily ever after." Digital Vinny laughed. "And what does Traven think will happen to the old man? He thinks we are putting him in a home." Skylar giggled. The idiot. In the corner of the living room, the real Trayvon dropped the tray he was holding. The metal clattered loudly, but no one looked at him. All eyes were glued to the screens. "We framed Trayvon," the digital Skylar said casually. "My fingerprints aren't on anything." Trayvon locked the door. Trayvon bought the zip ties. The guests were backing away from Skylar as if she were radioactive. They bumped into furniture, they spilled drinks, but they couldn't look away. "Traven goes to prison for life. The old man is dead, and you and I are $2 million richer on a beach in Rio." The real Skylar jumped down from the chair. She looked wild. She looked like a trapped animal. "That is not me," she shrieked, grabbing a guest by the lapels. "A man named Marcus, one of Trayvon's oldest friends." "Marcus, you know me. That is edited. That is not real." Marcus shoved her away, disgust written all over his face. "Don't touch me," he said. The screen flickered again. Today, 4:30 p.m. Living room. This video was shorter. It was just audio accompanied by a still frame of Skylar's face taken from the security camera in the hall. The audio was crisp. It was the conversation Skylar had on the phone just before the party started. "I can wait until this is over," she was saying. "I am so sick of pretending. Sick of this house, and sick of Trayvon's friends." "Who Digital Vinny?" asked on the recording. "Those bougie black idiots," she spat. "The doctors and the lawyers, they think they are so special because they have degrees. They are just props, Vinny. I smile at them, I pour them cheap champagne, and they clap like seals. They don't know I am laughing at them. They don't know I think they are dirt." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy. It was violent. Skylar stood in the center of the circle, her chest heaving. She looked around at the faces she had just insulted, the faces of the people she had called friends an hour ago. Marcus stepped forward. His face was stone. "Dirt," he repeated quietly. Skylar backed away, shaking her head. "No, I didn't mean. I was stressed. You called us props." A woman said, her voice trembling with rage. "You invited us here to witness your crime, and you called us props." Trayvon made a sound. It was a low, keening wail like a wounded dog. He fell to his knees in the corner of the room, his hands gripping his hair. "She played me," he sobbed. "She played me." Vinny looked at the door. He calculated the distance. He started to move toward the exit. "I am out of here," he muttered. "This is a domestic dispute. I got nothing to do with this." The front door locked with a loud electronic thud, the smart lock engaging. "Nobody leaves." The voice boomed through the speakers. It was my voice, distorted, amplified, but undeniable. I kicked the closet door from the inside. The wood splintered. I pushed the coats aside and stepped out into the hallway. The light from the living room screens spilled into the hall, illuminating me. I wasn't wearing the filthy rags from the basement. In the back of the closet behind the winter coats, I had kept a garment bag, my dress blues, my navy uniform. It was a little tight around the middle and it smelled of mothballs, but it commanded respect. I walked into the living room. I limped slightly, favoring my left leg, but my back was straight. My face was still smeared with grease and dried blood, a stark contrast to the crisp white uniform and the gold buttons. The crowd parted. They stared at me with a mixture of horror and awe. I was the ghost returning to haunt the castle. I walked to the center of the room. Skylar stared at me, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. She looked small now. The gold dress looked cheap. Jefferson Marcus whispered, "We thought..." "She said you were sick. She said you were upstairs sleeping." I looked at Marcus. I looked at the crowd. She said a lot of things. I said, my voice rough but steady. I turned to Skylar. "You wanted a legacy, Skylar. You wanted to make a mark." I pointed to the screen where her face was frozen in a loop of hate. "Congratulations. You are famous." Skylar's face crumpled. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a primal terror. She looked at Vinny, but he turned his back on her. She looked at Trayvon, but he was curled in a ball on the floor. She was alone. "Jeff, please," she whispered, reaching out a hand. "We can explain." It was just talk. Just stress. I didn't answer. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. I pressed one last button. The lights in the house snapped back on, blinding white light. And then the siren started. Not one siren. Dozens. They were close, right outside the driveway. Cliff had timed it perfectly. Skylar ran to the window. She pulled back the curtain. Red and blue lights washed over her face. "No," she screamed. "No, no, no." She turned back to me, her eyes wild. "You old bastard. You ruined everything." She lunged at me, her nails hooked into claws. She screamed a sound of pure hate, but she never reached me. The front door burst open with a crash that shook the house. "Police, get on the ground!" Uniformed officers poured into the hallway, weapons drawn. I stood still amidst the chaos, my uniform bright under the lights. I watched as the world Skylar built on lies collapsed around her. It was over. The projection was finished. Now it was time for the reality. Skylar moved with the speed of a cornered animal. Her face twisted into a mask of pure fury. She launched herself across the room, her manicured nails aimed at my eyes. "You ruined everything." She shrieked, a high-pitched sound that grated on the nerves. "You should have just died, old man." I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, my posture rigid in my dress uniform. I had faced enemy fire. I had faced storms at sea. I was not afraid of a desperate woman in a cocktail dress. Before she could reach me, the front door exploded inward. "Police, get down on the ground. Now!" The command boomed through the hallway, followed by the thud of heavy boots. A tactical team swarmed into the living room, weapons drawn, moving with precision. Behind them walked two uniformed officers and my old friend Clifford Banks, looking smug in his utility vest. Skylar froze mid-lunge, her eyes wide with shock. She looked around wild and panicked as the officers surrounded her. "Get on the ground, Mom," an officer shouted, his gun trained on her center mass. "No," she screamed, backing away. "You don't understand. He attacked me. He is crazy." "Get down," the officer repeated, stepping closer. Skylar looked at Vinny, hoping for a savior. But Vinny was already on his knees, his hands laced behind his head. He knew the drill. He wasn't going to fight a SWAT team for a woman who had just been exposed on a giant screen. Skylar let out a frustrated sob and dropped to her knees, her golden dress pooling around her like a deflated parachute. "It is a mistake," she cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "My father-in-law, he has dementia. He hacked the system. Those videos are fake. Save it for the judge, lady," Cliff said, stepping forward. He walked over to me and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Jeff?" I nodded, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at my bruised ribs. "I am fine, Cliff. Just in time." Cliff grinned. "I told you I was monitoring the frequency. When you sent the Omega code, I knew it was go time." He handed me a thick manila envelope. "Here, the rest of the ammunition." I took the envelope, my hands steady. I looked at Skylar kneeling on the floor, her hands cuffed behind her back. She looked up at me, hatred burning in her eyes. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "I have lawyers, Jeff. Good lawyers. I will sue you for everything you have. I will take this house. I will take your pension. I will bury you in court." I opened the envelope. I pulled out a stack of documents. "You won't be suing anyone, Skylar," I said, my voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room, "because you don't have any money to pay a lawyer." "What are you talking about?" she spat. "I have my business. I have my store." I smiled. "Ah, yes. The boutique in Buckhead. Luxe and lace. Very trendy. Very expensive." I held up a document. "Did you know who owns the building your store is in, Skylar?" She frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "A holding company. Summit Properties." I nodded. "And do you know who owns Summit Properties?" I let the silence stretch out. "I do." Skylar's mouth fell open. "No. That is impossible. You are broke. You clip coupons." "I clip coupons because I like a good deal," I said. "But I also invested in commercial real estate 30 years ago. I own the building, Skylar. And I own the lease." I pulled out another paper. A notice of eviction. "According to your lease agreement, Clause 4, Section B, any tenant convicted of a felony or involved in criminal activity on the premises forfeits their lease immediately." I dropped the paper on the floor in front of her. "You used the store's back office to forge the credit card applications in my name. We have the IP logs. That is criminal activity. Your lease is terminated, effective immediately." Skylar stared at the paper, her face pale. But my inventory, my stock, seized, I said. To cover the back rent you haven't paid in 3 months, and to cover the damages to my property. She looked like she was going to be sick. My store, she whispered. That was my way out. I turned to Vinny. He was watching me with a mixture of fear and respect. And you, Mr. Moretti, I said, walking over to him. Vinny swallowed hard. I didn't do nothing, old man. I was just a guest at a party. Were you? I asked. I pulled out another document. This one was a promissory note, a loan agreement. Trayvon owes you $100,000, correct? Vinny nodded slowly. Yeah, and I want my money. I am sure you do, I said. But there is a problem. The money Trayvon borrowed. Where did it come from? Vinny narrowed his eyes. My business. Your business, I repeated. Legitimate business. I held up a printout of a bank transfer. Because according to this trace, my friend Cliff ran your lending capital comes from a shell company in the Cayman Islands, a company that was flagged by the FBI for money laundering 6 months ago. Vinny went white. He started to sweat. And here is the interesting part. I continued. The shell company, it is a subsidiary of a larger fund, a fund called Neptune Ventures. I paused, letting it sink in. I am the majority shareholder of Neptune Ventures, Vinny. The room was silent. Even the police officers looked surprised. I bought into the fund 5 years ago as a high-risk hedge, I explained. I didn't know they were washing money for loan sharks until I looked into your operation last night. I leaned down until my face was inches from Vinny S. So technically, Vinny, you lent my son my own money, and now you are trying to extort him for it. Vinny looked like he wanted to cry. Mr. Moore, I didn't know. I swear. I straightened up. I am dissolving the fund, Vinny. I am turning all the records over to the FBI, including your ledger. Vinny slumped forward, his forehead touching the floor. I am dead, he moaned. They are going to kill me. Probably, I agreed. I turned back to Skylar. She was shaking her head back and forth, mumbling to herself. No, no, no. This can't be happening. You are just a senile old man. You are nothing. I am the man who built the systems that guide missiles. Skylar, I said, my voice hard as granite. I calculate trajectories, I anticipate variables, and I always hit my target. You are the target. Skylar screamed, a raw primal sound of defeat. She lunged forward, trying to bite the leg of the officer holding her. Get off me, she yelled, thrashing against the cuffs. You can't arrest me. I am a victim. He trapped me. He tricked me. Stop resisting, the officer warned, tightening his grip. She looked at the crowd of guests, her friends, her audience. Help me, she begged. Someone help me. He is lying. He is the devil. But no one moved. They looked at her with disgust, with pity, with fear. They saw her for what she was. A fraud. A predator who had picked the wrong prey. And then she snapped. The mask of the socialite fell away, completely revealing the ugly rot underneath. You are all pathetic, she shrieked, spitting at the crowd. You stand there judging me. You are just as bad, you greedy sycophants. You leeches. She turned her gaze to the black guests, Trayvon S. friends. And you, she snarled, using a word that made the officers flinch. You think you are so special because you wear suits. You are still just... She screamed a slur so vile, so hateful that it seemed to suck the air out of the room. The officer slammed her face into the carpet. That is enough. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, assault, and fraud, the officer recited, his voice flat. Skylar continued to scream, muffled by the rug. She cursed me. She cursed Trayvon. She cursed the world. I watched her. I felt no satisfaction, no joy, just a deep, weary sadness. She was broken. She had broken herself against the rock of her own greed. Take her away, I said quietly. The officers hauled her up. She kicked and screamed, her heels dragging on the floor as they dragged her out the front door. The flashing lights outside illuminated her one last time, a golden figure thrashing in the dark. And then she was gone. Vinny was led out next, silent and defeated. The guests began to filter out, shell-shocked and silent. They avoided looking at me. They just wanted to escape the blast zone. Finally, the room was empty. Except for Trayvon. He was still curled in the corner, his hands over his head as if trying to block out the world. He was sobbing quietly. I looked at him. My son. The boy I had carried on my shoulders, the man who had held me down while his wife tried to crack my skull. Cliff walked over to me. "You okay, Jeff?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, I am okay." "What about him?" Cliff asked, nodding at Trayvon. I looked at my son. "Leave us, Cliff," I said. "I need to handle this alone." Cliff hesitated, then nodded. "I will be outside. Holler if you need me." He left, closing the door behind him. The silence in the room was heavy. The screens were still on, showing the frozen image of the kitchen, the evidence of our family's destruction. "Trayvon," I said. He didn't move. Trayvon looked at me. Slowly, painfully, he lowered his hands. He looked up. His face was swollen from crying. His eyes were red and hollow. "Dad," he whispered. "I am sorry." I walked over to a chair and sat down. My legs were tired. I was tired. "Get up," I said. Trayvon struggled to his feet. He stood before me, slumped and broken. "Why?" I asked. Just one word. "Why?" Trayvon wiped his nose. "I was scared, Dad. I owed Vinny so much money. He said he would hurt Skylar. He said he would hurt you. So you decided to kill me instead." I asked, my voice level. "No." Trayvon sobbed. "I didn't want to kill you." Skylar said, "She said it would be painless. She said it was the only way. She said I repeated." "You listened to her. You let her poison your mind. You let her poison my drink." "I know," Trayvon cried. "I am weak, Dad. I am a coward." "I know." I looked at him. I saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't evil. He was just weak. And weakness in the face of evil is a dangerous thing. "You are going to prison, son," I said. Trayvon nodded. "I know. You are going to be charged as an accomplice, attempted murder, conspiracy." Trayvon closed his eyes, tears leaking out. "I deserve it." I leaned forward. "But you have a choice." Trayvon opened his eyes. A flicker of hope. "What choice?" "You can go down with her," I said. "You can stay silent. You can let her lawyers spin a story that you were the mastermind, that she was the victim, and you will go away for 20 years. Or what Trayvon asked. "Or you can be a man," I said. "For the first time in your life, you can stand up. You can tell the truth. You can testify against her." "Testify," Trayvon whispered. "Yes," I said. "You tell them everything. You tell them how she planned it, how she manipulated you, how she forged the documents. You give them the evidence to put her away for a long time." "And what happens to me?" Trayvon asked. "You still go to prison," I said. "But maybe not for 20 years, maybe for 5, maybe less if you cooperate." Trayvon looked at the floor. 5 years. "It is better than life," I said. "And it is better than living with the guilt of letting her get away with it." I stood up. I walked over to him. I put my hands on his shoulders. "I can't save you from the consequences of your actions, Trayvon," I said softly. "I won't. You tried to kill me. That breaks something that can never be fixed." I felt him tremble under my hands. "But I can give you a chance to redeem your soul," I said. I pulled the envelope from my pocket, the one with the evidence against Skylar. "Take this," I said, handing it to him. "Give it to the police. Tell them the truth, all of it. Don't leave anything out, even the parts that make you look bad, especially those parts." Trayvon took the envelope. He held it like it was heavy. "Why?" he asked, looking at me. "Why are you helping me? After what I did?" "Because you are my son," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "And because I failed you. I protected you too much. I made life too easy for you. I didn't teach you how to fight." I stepped back. "Now go. The police are waiting outside." Trayvon looked at the envelope, then at me. He straightened up. He wiped his face. "I will do it, Dad," he said. "I will tell them." He turned and walked toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the knob. "I love you, Dad," he said without turning around. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He opened the door and walked out into the night to meet his fate. I stood alone in the living room, surrounded by the wreckage of the party. The screens were still glowing blue. The champagne was still flat in the glasses. It was over. I had won. But as I looked around at my empty house, I realized that victory tasted a lot like ash. The silence in the living room was heavier than the chaos that had preceded it. The police lights had faded into the distance, taking the wail of sirens and the shrieking of my daughter-in-law with them. The guests had fled, leaving behind overturned chairs and spilled champagne that soaked into the rug like blood. Now it was just the two of us, the father who had returned from the dead and the son who had helped dig the grave. Trayvon was still on his knees in the center of the room. He looked small. The expensive suit I had paid for was rumpled and stained with sweat. He was shaking violently, his hands covering his face as he sobbed into the empty air. It was a sound I had heard before when he was 6 years old and had broken a window playing baseball. Back then I had hugged him and told him accidents happen. Back then I could fix it with a broom and a dustpan. I could not fix this. I walked over to the leather armchair that Skylar had used as her throne. I sat down heavily, my joints aching from the days of confinement in the basement. I rested my cane against my knee and looked at him. "Get up, Trayvon," I said. My voice was low, devoid of the anger that had fueled me for the last 48 hours. Now there was only exhaustion. He didn't move. He just cried harder, his shoulders heaving. "I didn't mean to." Daddy choked out through his hands. "She made me. She said it was the only way. She said the loan sharks would kill us." I was scared, Dad. I was so scared. I hit the floor with my cane, a sharp crack that made him flinch. "Look at me," I commanded. Slowly, painfully, he lowered his hands. His face was a wreck, swollen eyes, running nose, the face of a man whose soul had been crushed. He looked at me with the desperation of a drowning man, hoping I would throw him a rope. "She manipulated me," he whispered. "She is a monster, Dad. You saw the videos, you saw what she said. I am a victim too." I stared at him for a long moment. I let the silence stretch until it was suffocating. "A victim," I repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what you think you are, son?" "A victim." He nodded eagerly, grasping at the excuse. "Yes. She controlled everything. The money, the house, me. I didn't want to hurt you. I love you, Dad. I never wanted this." I reached into the pocket of my dress uniform. I pulled out the burner phone Cliff had given me. I tapped the screen, bringing up a video file. I didn't play it on the big screen this time. I held it out to him. "Watch," I said. Trayvon wiped his eyes and looked at the small screen. It was the footage from the kitchen, the night of the poisoning. There is Skylar crushing the pills. There is Skylar stirring the juice. And there you are, Trayvon, leaning against the refrigerator watching her. I paused the video. I pointed a finger at his image on the screen. "Look at your hands, Trayvon. Are they tied? Is she holding a gun to your head?" Trayvon stared at the image, his mouth opening and closing. "No, but..." I hit play. On the video, Skylar handed him the glass. "Stir it again before you give it to him," she said. "And you took it," I said, my voice rising. "You took the glass. You didn't throw it in the sink. You didn't call the police. You asked about the autopsy." Trayvon recoiled as if I had slapped him. "I was panic-stricken," he stammered. "I wasn't thinking straight." "You were thinking clearly enough to worry about getting caught," I countered. "You were thinking clearly enough to lock me in the basement. You were thinking clearly enough to buy zip ties and lie to the doctor and stage a crime scene." I stood up, ignoring the pain in my legs. I towered over him. "You are not a victim, Trayvon. You are an accomplice." "No, Dad, please," he begged, grabbing at the hem of my trousers. "Don't say that." I kicked his hand away. "Do not touch me," I snapped. "You lost the right to touch me when you handed me a glass of poison. You lost the right to call me Dad when you left me in a basement with a bucket for a toilet." I walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. "Skylar is evil," I said, looking at my reflection in the glass. "She is a predator. But you, Trayvon, you are something worse. You are a coward. You saw evil happening in your own kitchen and you said nothing. You stood by and watched." I turned back to him. "Your silence was your signature on my death warrant. You didn't crush the pills, but you held the cup. In the eyes of the law and in the eyes of God, that makes you just as guilty." Trayvon collapsed forward, his forehead touching the floor. "I am sorry," he wailed. "I am so sorry." "Sorry does not fix this," I said coldly. "Sorry does not undo the betrayal." I walked back to him and stood over his prostrate form. "The police are outside, Trayvon. Cliff is talking to them. They have the evidence. They have the videos. They have the forged documents. They are waiting for my signal to come in here and arrest you." Trayvon looked up, terror in his eyes. "Arrest me." "But I helped you. I gave you the bagel. I told you I was sorry. You gave me a bagel after you starved me for 2 days," I said. "You think a piece of bread buys your freedom after attempted murder? Please, Dad, he sobbed. I can't go to prison. I won't survive in there. Skylar will blame me for everything. She already has, I said, and without my testimony she might succeed. She is a master manipulator. She will convince a jury that you were the abusive husband who forced her to help you kill your father for the inheritance. Trayvon went pale. She would do that. She absolutely would, I confirmed. And you would go away for life. I let that sink in. I watched the realization of his doom settle over him. He was trapped. He had no way out. But I am not done with you yet, I said. Trayvon looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes like a dying candle. What? What do you mean? I have spoken to the district attorney. I lied. It wasn't a total lie. Cliff had connections, but I was improvising the details. I have offered them a deal. A deal, Trayvon breathed. Yes, I told them that Skylar is the mastermind. I told them that you were coerced. I told them that if you cooperate, if you testify against her, they can offer you a plea bargain. Trayvon scrambled to his knees. I will do it. I will testify. I will tell them everything. I will bury her. I held up a hand, stopping him. Not so fast. That is the deal with the law. But you also have to make a deal with me. Anything, Dad. Anything. I looked at him with a gaze that stripped him bare. You have two choices, Trayvon. Choice A is simple. You say nothing. You go out there, you get arrested alongside your wife, you stand trial, you take your chances. Maybe you get 20 years, maybe you get life. But you keep your pride such as it is. Trayvon shook his head violently. No. No prison. What is choice B? Choice B. I said, my voice hardening into steel. You turn yourself in tonight. You confess to everything. You become the state's witness. You accept a plea for lesser charges. Negligence. Conspiracy. You will serve time, Trayvon. Maybe 2 years. Maybe house arrest and probation. But you will have a criminal record. I can do that, he said quickly. I can do probation. I wasn't finished, I barked. That is the legal part. Here is my part. I walked over to the desk and picked up a document Cliff had prepared for me earlier. I threw it at Trayvon's feet. If you take choice B, you sign this. Trayvon picked up the paper, his hands trembling. What is it? It is a renunciation of inheritance, I said. He looked up at me confused. Inheritance? I am disinheriting you, Trayvon. Completely. If you sign this, you agree that you receive nothing. Not this house, not my savings. Not the life insurance policy you tried to kill me for. Nothing. Trayvon stared at the paper. But, Dad, how will I live? I lost my job. I have debts. I stepped closer, leaning down into his face. You will work, I said. You will work like a man. You will get a job with your hands. You will sweat. You will bleed. You will learn the value of $1 because for the next 10 years you are not seeing a single cent from me. 10 years, he whispered. 10 years, I repeated. That is the term. If you stay clean, if you work hard, if you pay your own way for 10 years, then maybe we can talk about a relationship. Maybe. But the money is gone, Trayvon. Gone, he asked. I gave it away, I said. The $20 million in the trust. The patent royalties. I signed it all over this morning. It is going to a scholarship fund for underprivileged kids. Kids who actually want to work. Kids who don't try to murder their parents for a handout. Trayvon looked like I had shot him. 20 million. You had $20 million. I did, I said. And you would have had it all eventually. All you had to do was wait. All you had to do was be a decent son. But you got greedy. And now you have nothing. Trayvon dropped the paper. He put his head in his hands and wept. Not tears of fear this time, but tears of loss. He finally understood what his greed had cost him. He had traded a kingdom for a quick payout, and he had lost both. So what is it going to be, I asked mercilessly. Prison with Skylar, or poverty with a chance at redemption? Choose. Trayvon looked at the paper. He looked at the door where the police were waiting. He looked at me. He picked up a pen from the desk. His hand shook as he signed the document. I choose redemption, he whispered. I took the paper from him. I checked the signature. It was shaky, but valid. Good, I said. I put the paper in my pocket. Now stand up. Trayvon stood up. He looked unsteady. Walk out that door, I commanded, pointing to the exit. Go to the officer in charge. Tell him you want to make a statement. Tell him everything. Do not leave out a single detail. Do not try to protect yourself. If I find out you lied about one thing, the deal is off, and I will help the prosecutor put you away for life. Trayvon nodded. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were full of a terrible longing. Dad, will you ever forgive me? I looked at my son, the man who had watched me die. I don't know, Trayvon, I said honestly. Ask me in 10 years. Trayvon nodded. He turned and walked toward the door. He moved like an old man burdened by a weight he would carry for the rest of his life. I watched him go. I watched him step out into the night. I watched the police officers approach him. I watched him put his hands behind his back and surrender. The door closed. I was alone. The house was quiet. The screens were dark. The war was over. I sat down in my chair and closed my eyes. I was tired. So tired. I had won. I had saved my life. I had destroyed my enemies. But as I sat there in the silence of my empty victory, I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. I had won the war, but I had lost my son, and that was a price no father should ever have to pay. The courtroom was packed on the day of the sentencing. Skylar sat at the defendant's table, her blonde hair now dull and unkempt, her designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit that did nothing to flatter her. She looked smaller, deflated. When Trayvon took the stand, she didn't even look at him. She just stared at the table, her jaw set in a hard line of bitterness. Trayvon's testimony was brutal. He didn't hold back. He detailed every conversation, every plan, every manipulation. He told the jury about the beta blockers. He told them about the staged fall. He told them about the plot to frame him for murder. Skylar's lawyer tried to paint him as a liar, as a desperate husband trying to save his own skin, but the evidence was overwhelming. The videos from my hidden cameras played on the courtroom screens, damning her in her own voice. The jury watched in silence as she laughed about killing me. They watched as she called them all idiots. There was no coming back from that. When the verdict was read, Skylar didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at me sitting in the front row and mouthed one word. You. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in a federal penitentiary for conspiracy to commit murder, assault, and fraud. She was led away in shackles, her head high, her eyes burning with a cold, unrepentant fire. She never looked at Trayvon. Not once. Trayvon's sentencing was different. The judge looked at him with a mixture of pity and sternness. Because of his cooperation and his testimony, the district attorney had recommended leniency. Trayvon Moore, the judge said, you are a weak man. You allowed yourself to be manipulated into committing a heinous act against your own father. However, you also showed a flicker of conscience at the end. You stopped the murder, you fed your father when he was starving, and you told the truth when it mattered. Trayvon stood with his head bowed, tears streaming down his face. I sentence you to 5 years of probation, the judge continued. You will complete 2,000 hours of community service. You will pay restitution for the damages to your father's property, and you will have no contact with the victim unless initiated by him. The gavel banged. It was over. Trayvon looked at me across the courtroom. He looked like he wanted to say something to apologize again, but he didn't. He just nodded slowly, accepting his fate. He walked out of the courtroom a free man, but a man with a heavy burden. Outside on the courthouse steps, the reporters were waiting. They wanted a statement. They wanted the soundbite from the millionaire veteran who survived his family's plot. I stood at the podium, Cliff by my side. I have only one thing to say, I told the cameras. Justice has been served. But let this be a lesson. Greed is a poison. It kills families. It kills love. And in the end, it leaves you with nothing. I turned to Cliff. Let us go. We walked away, leaving the cameras behind. A week later, I called a press conference of a different kind. I invited the trustees of the Atlanta Youth Scholarship Fund to my house. I also invited Trayvon. He came looking nervous and unsure. He was wearing work boots and jeans, clothes I hadn't seen him in since he was a teenager, helping me in the yard. He stood at the back of the room watching as I signed the papers. I am donating 90% of my assets, I announced to the small gathering. $20 million. It will go to fund college scholarships for underprivileged youth in this city. Kids who want to be engineers, doctors, teachers. Kids who understand the value of hard work. The trustees applauded. They shook my hand. They called me a hero. I looked at Trayvon. He was staring at me, his face pale. After the guests left, I walked over to him. You heard, I asked. Trayvon nodded. 20 million. You gave away $20 million. I did, I said. Why, he asked, his voice trembling. That was your legacy, Dad. That was... That was everything you worked for. No, I said. Money is not a legacy, son. Money is just fuel. You can use it to build something or you can use it to burn yourself down. You and Skylar tried to burn me down for it. Trayvon looked at his hands. I know. I was stupid. I was greedy. You were, I agreed. And because of that greed, you lost the right to that money. But more importantly, you lost the understanding of what it means. I walked over to the window looking out at the garden where Etta used to plant roses. I earned that money, Trayvon, I said. I built those guidance systems. I solved problems no one else could solve. I spent nights awake staring at blueprints. I spent months at sea away from my family. Every dollar in that trust was a drop of my sweat. I turned back to him. You didn't want my sweat. You wanted my blood. You wanted the payout without the work. And that is why you will never see a dime of it. Trayvon hung his head. I get it, Dad. I really do. Good, I said. Because now you are going to learn what I learned 40 years ago. I handed him a card. It was a business card for a carpentry shop in Decatur. What is this? Trayvon asked. A job, I said. The owner is an old friend of mine. He needs an apprentice. Someone to sweep the floors, carry the lumber, sand the wood, minimum wage, hard work. Trayvon stared at the card. A carpenter. Yes, I said. You like nice things, Trayvon. You like expensive suits. You like big houses. Well, now you are going to learn how to build them. You are going to learn how much a sheet of plywood weighs. You are going to learn what a blister feels like. You are going to earn your bread by the sweat of your brow. Trayvon looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, just resignation. And maybe a spark of something else. Determination. Okay, he said quietly. I will do it. Don't do it for me, I said. Do it for yourself. Because right now you are nothing. You are a shadow of a man. This job, it might make you real again. He put the card in his pocket. Thank you, Dad. Don't thank me, I said. Thank the judge who didn't put you in a cage. Now go. You start tomorrow at 6 a.m. Don't be late. Trayvon nodded. He turned to leave. He stopped at the door. Dad, he said, can I come see you sometimes? I looked at him. My son. The apprentice. Maybe, I said. When you can show me your hands and I see calluses instead of manicure marks. Then you can come see me. He nodded again. He walked out. I watched him go. He walked differently now. Less swagger, more weight. He was carrying his burden. 6 months passed. I rebuilt my house. I painted the walls back to beige. I put Etta's photos back on the mantle. I bought a new quilt, not handmade but warm. I traveled. Cliff and I went to Europe. We drank wine in Paris. We saw the Colosseum in Rome. We laughed about old times. We lived. But I kept tabs on Trayvon. I had cameras at the wood shop, not hidden ones this time, just the standard security feed my friend let me access. I watched him. I saw him sweeping the sawdust. I saw him carrying heavy beams, his back straining. I saw him get yelled at by the foreman when he messed up a cut. He didn't quit. He showed up every day. 6 a.m. sharp. He wore the same work boots. He ate a sandwich from a brown bag for lunch. I saw his hands change. They got rougher, darker. He got a cut on his thumb and he wrapped it in duct tape and kept working. He was learning. One afternoon I drove to the shop. I didn't go in. I parked across the street in my old Ford truck. It was closing time. Trayvon walked out. He was covered in dust. He looked tired. He walked with a limp, favoring his back. He walked to a beat-up sedan he had bought with his own money. No more luxury lease. He stopped at the car door. He looked at his hands. He flexed them. He looked at the calluses. And for the first time in years, I saw him smile. It wasn't a smug smile. It wasn't a greedy smile. It was a tired, proud smile. He had made something that day. He had earned his wage. I watched him get in the car and drive away. I didn't follow him. I didn't call him. Not yet. He wasn't ready, but he was getting there. I started my truck and drove home. The house was quiet when I got back, but it wasn't empty. It was full of memories, full of peace. I sat in my study, the door unlocked. I picked up a book. The war was over. The rebuilding had begun. And somewhere in a small apartment in Decatur, my son was sleeping the sleep of the just. the sleep of a man who had worked hard, and that I realized was the only inheritance worth giving. The smell of sawdust and pine resin hung heavy in the air of the Decatur Industrial Park. It was a scent that reminded me of my own father, a man who built fences and decks until his back gave out. I sat in my truck, the engine idling quietly across the street from the lumberyard. It was 6 in the evening. The shift was changing. I watched the metal bay doors roll up. Men walked out, dusting off their jeans, carrying lunch pails. They looked tired, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that comes from creating something from nothing. Then I saw him. Trayvon. He looked different. He had lost weight. The soft edges of his face, born from years of easy living and expensive dinners, had sharpened. He was wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing arms that were starting to show the definition of muscle built by lifting beams, not weights in a gym. There was a smudge of grease on his cheek and sawdust in his hair. He walked to his used sedan. He didn't slouch. He didn't check his phone every 5 seconds. He walked with a purpose. He stopped at the car door and stretched his back, wincing slightly. I knew that feeling. The ache of an honest day's labor. It was a pain that told you were alive. I wanted to get out of the truck. I wanted to walk over there and hug him. I wanted to tell him I was proud that he hadn't quit, that he hadn't run away when things got hard. But I stayed in my seat. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight. If I went to him now, I would undo everything. If I offered him a ride or a hot meal or a check, I would be robbing him again. I would be taking away his struggle. And his struggle was the only thing that could save him. I picked up the envelope from the passenger seat. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I had written it 3 times before I got the words right. No sentimentality, no guilt, just the terms of engagement. I waited until Trayvon got into his car and drove away, his taillights fading into the Atlanta traffic. Only then did I open my door. I walked over to the spot where he parked every day. I knew his routine. I had been watching. I taped the envelope to the brick wall right where he would see it when he pulled in tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I used heavy duct tape. I wanted to make sure it stuck. I patted the envelope once. "Goodbye, son," I whispered to the empty parking lot. I walked back to my truck. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might stay, and I had a plane to catch. The letter was short. Trayvon, I saw you working today. You are doing good. Keep doing it. Do not look for me. Do not try to call me. I am going away for a while. The money is gone. The house is empty. But the future is yours if you want it. Here is the deal. When you have saved enough money from your own paycheck to make a down payment on a house, not a rental, but a house you own with your name on the deed, call me. I don't care if it is a mansion or a shack. I care that you bought it. When you have the keys in your hand, call me. I will answer. Until then, build something real. Dad. It was harsh. It was cold. But it was the most loving thing I had ever written. I got into my truck and put it in gear. I drove toward the highway, leaving Decatur behind, leaving my son to find his own way in the dark. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the private lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. The noise and chaos of the terminal were muffled by thick glass walls. Jazz music played softly in the background. Sitting across from me was Clifford Banks, my oldest friend, my savior. He was wearing a linen suit and a Panama hat, looking like he was ready for a safari. He poured a dark red liquid into 2 large crystal glasses. A 1982 Bordeaux Jeff, he said, holding up the bottle. I have been saving this for a special occasion. I thought about opening it when my grandson was born. I thought about opening it when I retired. But this feels like the right moment. I took the glass. The wine was deep and rich, smelling of earth and history. To the mission, I said, raising my glass. To the mission, Cliff agreed, clinking his glass against mine. Operation Wake Up Call. We drank. The wine was incredible. It tasted like victory. It tasted like relief. You know, Jeff, Cliff said, setting his glass down. I was worried about you for a minute there. When I saw you in that basement tied to that pole, I thought I might have to break my rule about not hitting civilians. I chuckled. It was close, Cliff. But we got them. We sure did. Cliff grinned. I saw the news this morning. Skylar S. Lawyer is trying to plead insanity. They are not buying it. The videos are too damning. She is going away for a long time. Good, I said. She belongs in a cage. She is a predator, Cliff. She would have done it to someone else, if not me. And Trayvon Cliff asked, his voice softening. I looked out the window at the tarmac where the giant metal birds were taxiing in the twilight. He is working, I said. He is tired. He is broke. But he is working. He will be okay, Cliff said. He has your blood in him somewhere. It just took a while to circulate. I hope so, I said. I really hope so. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. I slid it across the table to Cliff. What is this? He asked. It is the paperwork for the scholarship fund, I said. I want you to be on the board, Cliff. I trust you. Make sure the money goes to kids who need it, kids who have grit, kids who don't have fathers to bail them out. Cliff opened the folder. He looked at the numbers. $20 million. You really gave it all away, he said, shaking his head. You crazy old sea dog. You could have bought an island. I have a house, I said. I have my pension. I have you. What do I need an island for? Besides, islands are lonely. I am done with lonely. Cliff smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. So where to first? Tokyo. London. I leaned back in the comfortable chair, swirling the wine in my glass. I was thinking Normandy, I said. I haven't been back since the anniversary tour 10 years ago. Then maybe Berlin, then down to Italy. Etta always wanted to see the Amalfi Coast. Cliff nodded. To Etta, then. To Etta, I said. We finished the bottle. We talked about old times. We talked about the ships we served on, the storms we weathered, the friends we lost. For the first time in months, I wasn't talking about betrayal or poison or courts. I was just talking to a friend. The announcer's voice came over the speaker, soft and polite. Flight 8112 to Paris is now boarding at gate F12. First and business class passengers may board at their leisure. That is us, Cliff said, standing up and adjusting his hat. Ready to go, Commander. I stood up. I grabbed my cane, not because I needed it as much anymore, but because it was a habit. I picked up my small carry-on bag. Ready, I said. We walked out of the lounge and into the concourse. The airport was busy with people rushing everywhere, dragging suitcases, chasing dreams. I walked among them feeling light. I walked down the jet bridge. The cool air of the tunnel hit my face. I stepped onto the plane. The flight attendant greeted me with a smile. Welcome aboard, Mr. Moore. Seat 1A. I found my seat. It was wide and comfortable. I sat down and buckled the belt. I looked out the window. The ground crew was loading luggage. The lights of the airport stretched out like a galaxy of stars. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. Not the burner phone, but my real one. I opened the security app one last time. The screen showed my house, the empty living room, the quiet kitchen, the basement door now unlocked and open. It was just a house. It wasn't a fortress anymore. It wasn't a prison. It was just wood and brick and drywall. I switched to the feed from the wood shop. It was dark now. Trayvon was gone. The shop was closed. I looked at the screen for a long moment. I felt the urge to check the logs to see exactly what time he clocked out, to see where he drove. The habit of surveillance was hard to break. I had spent 40 years watching screens, tracking blips on a radar, making sure nothing got through the perimeter. But the war was over. I wasn't a spy anymore. I wasn't a target. I was just a man going on vacation. I pressed the settings icon. I scrolled down to the bottom. Disable system. A prompt popped up. Are you sure you want to disable all cameras and remote access? This action cannot be undone remotely. I looked at the words. I thought about Trayvon sleeping in his small apartment. He needed to make his own mistakes now. He needed to live his own life without his father watching over his shoulder. And I needed to live mine. I moved my thumb. Yes. The screen went black. Connection terminated. I took a deep breath. It felt like the air in the cabin had suddenly gotten cleaner. I held down the power button on the phone. Slide to power off. The screen went dark. The reflection stared back at me. An old man, yes, but not a weak one. A man with scars, but a man who was still standing. I put the phone in my bag and zipped it shut. The engines roared to life, a deep vibration that shook the floor. The plane began to move, pushing back from the gate. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I thought about Etta. I thought about the blue water of the Amalfi Coast. I thought about the taste of the wine. I didn't think about Skylar. I didn't think about the poison. I didn't think about the basement. Those were stories from another life. A life I had left behind on the tarmac. The plane taxied to the runway. The engine spooled up to full power. I felt the force press me into the seat. We accelerated faster and faster, rushing toward the sky. And then, with a gentle lift, we were airborne. I was flying. I was free. This story teaches us a painful but necessary truth: shared blood does not guarantee loyalty. For years, Jefferson sacrificed his dignity to protect a son who saw him only as a paycheck. We often cling to toxic relationships out of guilt or duty, but true family is built on mutual respect, not manipulation. Greed can rot the soul, turning loved ones into strangers. Jefferson's journey proves that it is never too late to stand up for yourself. Saving your own life sometimes means letting go of the people you love, allowing them to face the consequences they earned. Peace is worth the price. If Jefferson's strategic revenge satisfied your craving for justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. What would you have done in his shoes? Let me know in the comments below.